Chapter 29, Ch29 Self-Sabotage. Harry's POV**. October mornings in Scotland weren't kind. The wind cut like knives as I trudged onto the pitch with my firebolt under my arm. Oliver Wood was already there, vibrating with that unhealthy mix of Quidditch obsession and caffeine. God damn, it's a relief I am British, otherwise I would have folded under this much cold. Right then, he barked the moment I got within earshot. Formations today, practice dodges, and oh, wait, what's this? The what's this turned out to be the Slytherin team strutting onto the pitch, all in smug unison. And there was our resident ferret, grinning like someone had finally found his missing brain cell. Sorry, Wood, Flint drawled, waving a piece of parchment. Special permission from Professor Snape. We've got practice. Wood's jaw worked furiously. You can't just. Oh, but we can, Malfoy cut in, drawing out every word. He swung a brand new Nimbus 2001 in his hand like it was a sword. Behind him, the entire Slytherin team showed off theirs. Ron's mouth dropped open. Blimey! Those are the best brooms money can buy. Exactly, Malfoy smirked. My father bought them for the whole team. We couldn't have the inferior equipment holding us back. He looked right at me, eyes glittering. I suppose some people have to make do with hand-me-downs and charity cases. I was about to retort when he pivoted toward Hermione, his lip curling. And speaking of charity, I don't know how you lot put up with a filthy little mud. Careful. My voice cut across the pitch like a blade. The entire Gryffindor team turned toward me. Malfoy sneered, but I didn't raise my wand. I don't need to. I just stepped closer, casual as anything. You know what's funny, Malfoy? I said, tilting my head. You spend all this energy insulting Hermione, but deep down you're jealous. Every last one of you. Flint scoffed. Jealous? Of her? Yes, I said calmly. Because no matter how much gold your daddies dump into your laps, not one of you could catch up to her in class if you tried. She's smarter than your whole team combined, and you can't stand it. So you call her names. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. Pathetic, really. Imagine admitting out loud that the only way you can compete with her is by buying your way out. The Gryffindor team choked on their laughter. Even Fred and George were bent double. Hermione went scarlet, but her chin lifted, pride shining in her eyes. Malfoy's smirk cracked. You shut up, Potter. That's when the wands came out. Slytherins, all at once, raising their arms. Really? I said, deadpan. All of you, against one second year? Not very sporting. And then, green and red light blazed toward me. How foolish, wait, I sound like Snape RN. I didn't even bother with my wand. Just raised a hand. Some dominance will teach them. The spells froze mid-air, suspended like fireflies in a jar. For a moment, the whole pitch was silent except for the wind. Then I flicked my wrist. Every single spell shot back at its caster. Flint howled as boils erupted on his face. Pusey staggered, petrified from the knees down. One poor seventh year blasted himself backward into the mud. The screams and crashes echoed across the stadium. Half the Slytherin team scrambled to crawl off the field. I let my hand drop casually. Self-sabotage, I said dryly. Bold strategy. The Gryffindor team broke into wild laughter, doubled over at the sight of Slytherins dragging themselves toward the castle. Even Wood laughed, though his eyes were still wide in shock. Merlin's beard, Potter, he wheezed. They're going to be in hospital for days. You thrashed them, and you didn't even draw your wand. Fred and George actually fell over each other, tears streaming down their faces. Best thing we've ever seen. And it wasn't even a prank. Ron clapped me on the back so hard I nearly dropped my broom. Mate, I'm both terrified of you and ridiculously proud. I shrugged, grinning faintly. Good practice, I'd say. Hermione's POV. I was still frozen where I stood. My cheeks burned, not from embarrassment this time, but something else. He'd defended me. Not with fists, or even just a spell, but with words sharp enough to slice Malfoy's smugness to ribbons. And then, he had made the entire Slytherin team look like fools. I shouldn't have been surprised. This was Harry. Always throwing himself into danger, always standing up for others. But there had been something different this time. The way he'd spoken, calm and razor-sharp, like he'd seen straight through Malfoy's mask. And when the spells had frozen in mid-air, when he'd just stopped them with a hand, my breath had caught. No wand. No incantation. Just Harry, standing there as if magic itself bent to him. I knew I shouldn't feel it, but a flutter stirred in my chest. I shoved it down quickly. No. Focus. He'd only done it to save my reputation. To shut Malfoy up. Nothing more. Still, as the Gryffindor team laughed and cheered around us, my eyes lingered on him a little longer than they should have. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, Harry Potter wasn't only my best friend. Potter. I'd barely made it to the locker room before Professor McGonagall's voice sliced through the air like a curse. She stood in the doorway, tartan robes billowing like a storm cloud, lips pressed into a line so thin it could cut glass. Behind her trailed Madame Hooch and two terrified Slytherins half-levitating Flint toward the hospital wing. I can explain, I began. I highly doubt that, she snapped, marching me down the corridor so fast my feet barely touched the floor. 17 stunners, 5 hexes, and, Merlin help me, one unidentified curse rebounding back onto the entire Slytherin Quidditch team. What on earth possessed you? I rubbed the back of my neck. Self-defense. McGonagall stopped dead, turned, and fixed me with that classic deadpan glare. Without a wand. Yes, looks like I overdid a little, still no regrets. Her nostrils flared, though her says another story. Detention, Potter. And you will write a 3-foot essay on proper dueling etiquette. Yes, Professor. I knew it, detention is just a facade. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Honestly, sometimes I think you're determined to give me grey hair. It suits you, Professor. The faintest twitch crossed her lips, as though she was fighting a smile. Detention extended. McGonagall, after she gave detention, said the headmaster has summoned me. Enter, came the calm voice from beyond the phoenix-carved door. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, half buried in paperwork, Fawkes perched nearby humming softly. When I stepped in, his eyes sparkled with that maddening mix of amusement and ancient concern. Ah, Harry, he said mildly. It seems you've given the school quite a show. I shrugged. Malfoy started it. Indeed, Dumbledore said. And yet, somehow, it was you who finished it by reflecting 17 spells at once, wandlessly, without apparent effort. I shifted under his gaze. Lucky reflexes. He chuckled softly. If that is luck, my boy, then I suspect Lady Luck herself has taken up permanent residence in your pocket. Silence hung for a moment, broken only by Fawkes' gentle chirp. Then Dumbledore leaned back, eyes thoughtful. Harry, you do realize what you did was extraordinary. Few wizards could even hope to accomplish it. I nodded. I know. I'll try to tone it down. He smiled faintly. You remind me of your parents in the best, and most exasperating ways. When I turned to leave, he added quietly, Harry, whatever path you are walking, do not lose your kindness along the way, and try not to show off too much. I met his eyes and smiled. Don't worry, Professor. It's kind of my favorite part. By dinner, the whole school knew. By dessert, it had evolved into legend. The Gryffindor common room exploded that night. Fred and George had charmed a banner that read, "Slytherin stunned by second year." Ron was reenacting my hand wave dramatically by the fire. And then he goes whoosh, and boom. Instant chaos. Malfoy screaming like a toddler. "Oi," I said from the armchair, "you're making me sound cool. Don't ruin my humble image." Hermione rolled her eyes. "Oh yes, you're so humble, Mr. I deflect 17 spells with a hand." I grinned. "Jealous? Of what exactly?" she retorted, crossing her arms. "Of my impeccable hair under pressure." Ron choked on his butterbeer. It looked like a bird's nest. Fred popped in, tossing a chocolate frog. "Doesn't matter, Maid Potter's hair now officially has its own fan club." I groaned. "Please don't start that." Too late. George already had a quill out, scribbling on a parchment titled Official Hair Appreciation Society of Harry James Potter. Even Hermione was laughing now, despite herself. For once, the night felt light. Easy. No shadows. Just warmth, laughter, and the crackle of the fire. Days after asterisk. The week that followed slid by in a comfortable rhythm. Classes, laughter, pranks, studying in the library with Hermione threatening to hex Ron's doodles. Professor Sprout had us pruning puff-apods. Ron nearly fainted when one exploded in his face. Flitwick demonstrated silent freezing charms. Mine didn't even flicker when I freeze a book. "Show off," Hermione muttered, though her smile said otherwise. During History of Magic, I practiced legilimency subtly while Binns droned about goblin rebellions. It was an exercise in control, listening without truly listening. At lunch, Dean Thomas tried to trade a chocolate frog card for a story about the Quidditch incident. I told him I'd only do interviews for the Quibbler now. That night, the castle slept. I didn't. The 7th floor corridor was silent, moonlight cutting silver lines across the stone floor. As I passed the blank stretch of wall, I focused my will. A place to train. A place to release everything I hold back. The door appeared tall, carved, waiting. I stepped through. Tonight, the room was vast. A dome of black stone under a fall sky that shimmered with pale aurora light. Runes pulsed faintly along the walls, feeding a hum of power that wasn't the room's usual magic. It was mine, echoing back at me. Each movement felt cleaner, sharper. Magic wasn't something I did anymore, it was me. I closed my eyes. Breathed. Felt. The air thickened with the weight of my magic. It pulsed, alive, around my skin. I raised my hand, palm open. A spark ignited, golden, pure. It bloomed outward, twisting into flame. I wasn't casting. I was creating. The fire coiled like a serpent, alive and obedient. When I thought of destruction, it grew hotter, turning blue-white. When I thought of peace, it dimmed to a warm ember. Then I willed, fiend fire. The incarnation wasn't even necessary. The fire understood. It exploded into a monstrous storm, dragons and serpents of pure flame howling through the air, devouring the room. The heat should have been unbearable, but it wasn't. The flames bent around me like wind around a rock, never touching, never harming. The sound was deafening. Beautiful. Terrifying. I lifted my hand again, and everything stopped. The world froze mid-burn. Then, with a single thought, it all folded back into a single, tiny spark floating in my palm. It winked out. The room went silent again, and I could hear my heartbeat. I really should not try that outside, I muttered, half smiling. I tried others, water from air, augmenti maxima, ventus or known as tempest jinx, lightning from storm clouds, Aries spell, to generate wind from stillness. Each time, the magic came easier. Each time, the world itself seemed to breathe with me. Not channeling magic, being it. That's when I noticed something strange. I wasn't tired. Not even slightly. Magic didn't drain me anymore. It circulated, like air, like thought. Infinite, as long as I stayed aware. It wasn't power. It was truth. After a while, I sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the faint traces of my magic ripple across the stone. The air smelled like ozone and ancient smoke. I realized the room could barely contain what I was doing anymore, it was starting to warp under the force of my practice. And that gave me an idea. Somewhere beneath my feet, there was another chamber. Vast. Empty. Hidden from all eyes. A place where no one would interrupt me, and where power like mine wouldn't draw questions. The Chamber of Secrets. I smiled faintly. A place for secrets and serpents, I murmured to myself. Perfect. The torches flickered, as though the castle itself agreed. Tomorrow night, I'd find the entrance. And if the basilisk was still alive, maybe it was time the ancient guardian met a wizard who didn't fear it. Chapter 30, Ch 30 Lightning Bolt Scarhead. Harry's POV**. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that pretending to be normal takes more effort than lifting a mountain. The morning sunlight slanted through the great hall's enchanted ceiling, dappling the long tables in honey gold. I sat between Ron and Hermione, lazily spooning porridge into my mouth while listening to Seamus explain, for the fourth time, how he almost didn't blow up his cauldron this week. Deidara would be proud. You know, I said, pretending to think deeply, if we ranked almost explosions, you'd still be top of the class. Dean snorted into his pumpkin juice. Ron laughed so hard he nearly dropped his toast. Hermione gave me that look, the one that said she was trying not to laugh but also disapproved on principle. Honestly, Harry, she said, brushing crumbs from her sleeve, you're supposed to encourage him, not. Encouragement is relative, I said mildly. I'm encouraging him to embrace his destiny as Hogwarts' future demolition expert. That earned me a snort from Fred and George a few seats down. Potter's right. Fred called. We could use a third partner, Seamus. Pyrotechnics division. Hermione sighed. You lot are impossible. Accurate, I said, stealing her toast when she wasn't looking. She noticed, of course. Harry. Hey. I'm helping, I said, straight-faced. You said you're cutting down on carbs. Ron choked on his pumpkin juice, laughing. Hermione threw a napkin at me. For a moment, it felt like the world was simple. Warm. Safe. But even then, underneath the laughter, I could feel it, the hum of the castle's ley lines brushing against my magic, like invisible rivers of power calling to me. Every spell, every candle flame, every enchanted object whispered faintly to my senses. I smiled through it. I had to. No one could know yet, not until I understood it all. Professor McGonagall swept through the classroom like an elegant thunderstorm, robes crisp, eyes sharper than her animagus claws. Today's lesson was on complex transformation, rabbits into slippers. Seriously, what's with these random-ass transfigurations? Wands ready, she announced. Concentration and control, class. Transfiguration is not a matter of brute force, but finesse. Why must she repeat this thing every single time, lady? We heard you. I twirled my wand between my fingers, catching Hermione's glance. She whispered, try not to show off this time. I smiled. No promises. On her mark, I focused, and the rabbit on my desk shimmered. There was no wand motion, no muttered incantation. Just intent. The air rippled, and the creature turned neatly into a pair of soft grey slippers with twitching ears. Perfect symmetry. Hermione's transfiguration followed a moment later, slightly slower, but clean. She bit her lip and refused to admit she was impressed. Excellent work, Potter, McGonagall said as she passed, voice even but eyes lingering for a second longer than usual. And Granger, well done as always. When she moved on, Ron leaned over and whispered, I swear she's starting to think you're a ghost or something. No human gets things perfect like that. I'm human, I said with a smirk. Just a better version. Ron rolled his eyes. You sound like a bad ad. You are not wrong, Ron. After dinner, the trio gathered in the library, pretending to do homework and succeeding only halfway. Hermione was buried in arithmancy for the adept, Ron doodled on parchment, and I practiced silent levitation by making Ron's quill bob just out of reach. Oi, he barked. Harry. I looked up innocently. Oh, must be a gust of wind. I like annoying them so much. Hermione peeked over her book. You're incorrigible. Big word, I teased. You kiss your dictionary good night. She threw a scrap of parchment at me, and I flicked my fingers, it stopped midair. Hovered. Hermione blinked. I smiled faintly, then let it drop. See? Wind. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously, but she said nothing. Underneath the playfulness, though, my mind was elsewhere, deep under the castle. I could feel the serpent's lair calling to me. Old magic, stagnant but strong. Something ancient and familiar. Tomorrow night, I'd answer it. Everyone was asleep. The moonlight through the dorm window turned everything silver and still. I sat at the edge of my bed, tracing the faint pulse of magic that thrummed through my fingers like a heartbeat. Tomorrow, I'd go below. Just me, truth, and the dark. I smiled faintly at the ceiling. Let's see what secrets Slytherin left behind. Harry's POV**. The castle slept. Under the silver wash of midnight, the corridors were shadows and silence. My breath was slow, deliberate, the rhythm of someone who had rehearsed every step. Cloak first, the invisibility cloak melted over my shoulders, swallowing me in its ancient shimmer. Then, with a wave of my hand and a whisper under my breath, disillusionment. Cold rippled down my spine, blending me further into the dark. Mufflieto followed, the air around me humming faintly as sound itself turned away. Finally, a soft odor ebolens, scentless, traceless. I am not risking with Mrs. Norris. I was gone, even from the castle itself. The second-floor bathroom was still. Moonlight crept through cracked windows and pooled on damp tiles. Moaning Myrtle drifted near her stall, head bowed, a faint snore echoing from her translucent form. If ghosts could sleep, she was dreaming now. Sorry, Myrtle, I murmured quietly, knowing she couldn't hear. Not tonight. I stood before the sink with the serpentine carvings. Ancient stone. Forgotten power. My tongue shifted, the old language rolling like silk. Open. The sinks groaned, metal grinding against stone. The center column sank, widening into a spiraling chute. The air that rushed out was thick with age and secrets. Very dramatic growling. I stared down into it, a dark throat leading deep beneath Hogwarts, and smiled faintly. Let's test a theory. Stairs, I hissed. The stone trembled, and spirals formed, solid and winding downward into the dark. Perfect. All hail fanfictions. I descended, one hand brushing the wall, my wand lit with faint blue lumos maxima. The tunnel was vast, curved, damp, a labyrinth of sewage and forgotten stone. Rats scattered at my steps, though none dared cross my shadow. And then, I saw it, stretched across the passage like a collapsed bridge, a shed skin. Pale gold, longer than a train car, with scales the size of plates. I crouched, tracing it with awe. Each fragment hummed faintly with residual magic, venom, protection, strength. Beautiful, I whispered. And useful. With a flick of my wrist, the entire hide folded neatly into my enchanted pouch, vanishing like mist. At last, the tunnel opened into a massive cavern. The Chamber of Secrets. I'd read the descriptions. But seeing it, feeling it was something else. Pillars lined the vast hall like stone soldiers, carved with serpents coiling upward into darkness. Water rippled faintly across the floor, black as ink. The air smelled of dust, decay, and timeless waiting. At the far end stood him, Salazar Slytherin's statue, proud and solemn, his beard and robes carved in impossible detail. Racism final boss. I approached, boots whispering over the damp floor. Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four. Making a password that calls himself greatest is crazy. The stone mouth opened, groaning with ancient power. From the darkness behind it came a sound, a deep, shifting hiss, like scales dragging over rock. I stood still, steady. Then she emerged. A massive serpent, scales green as jade, eyes like molten gold. Her tongue flicked, tasting the air, tasting me. Her head alone was the size of a carriage. Who dares call me? Her voice hissed through the chamber, ancient, half mad. I do, I answered in Parseltongue, the words flowing effortlessly. I am heir of nothing, but seeker of truth. Her great eyes narrowed. You smell of magic, old, wrong, not of my master. Your master is gone, I said quietly. And you've been alone far too long. She let out a shuddering, rattling hiss. All gone. All gone. Only the silence now. The hunger. The dark. Her head darted forward, too fast for mortal eyes, but I didn't flinch. Her pupils dilated, the golden eyes igniting with that fatal gleam, the death stare. But I lifted my hand. And the magic bent. The basilisk's deadly gaze struck an invisible barrier, like light hitting glass. The air around me warped, humming with raw force. For a heartbeat, even the serpent froze, confused. Nice try, bitch. I smiled faintly. That won't work on me anymore. She screamed, a sound like stone grinding against bone, and lunged. My wand rose, angled upward. Time to flex. Ventus Fulmen. Wind surged first, spinning, whirling, gathering into a column of raw energy. Then it snapped toward the ceiling, splitting the air. And the sky answered. Through the enchanted rock far above, lightning fell, blue-white and furious, slamming straight down through my spell into her skull. The basilisk convulsed, her body jerking as the light pierced through scale and bone. The smell of ozone and burning flesh filled the chamber. When the light faded, she was still. Smoke curled from her eye sockets. The water hissed as her blood touched it. I exhaled slowly. Requiescat, serpent. The echoes died. All that remained was silence, pure, ancient, sacred. That wasn't necessary, I could have killed her with a thought. But that was badass. The storm light still flickered across the chamber's slick stone when I finally exhaled. The basilisk's massive form lay motionless, smoke still rising faintly from its charred head. The silence afterward was almost sacred, as if the chamber itself were holding its breath. He raised his wand, murmured a charm, and the air shimmered. With careful precision, I began to collect what was valuable. The basilisk's hide peeled away cleanly under controlled magic, folding itself neatly into rolls that vanished into his moleskin pouch, enchanted with an undetectable extension charm. Next came the venom, sealed in crystal vials by a flick of his wrist, tens of thousand drops of pure lethality suspended in green light. Even the scales, fangs, and bones were stored away methodically, like an alchemist preparing for a lifetime of work. When I finished, only a faint scorch mark remained on the stones where the creature had died. I looked up at the statue again. Slytherin's face seemed to be watching, neither judging nor approving, just knowing. I'll make something better of your legacy, I murmured. Not fear, or racism, but power with purpose. Curiosity tugged me toward the back of the serpent's resting chamber, a narrow alcove tucked behind the statue's base. There, nestled among the cold stones, lay something I could hardly believe my eyes. An egg, enormous, white-green, and perfectly preserved inside a faint shimmer of stasis magic. I stepped closer, awe washing away the fatigue in my limbs. The preservation field pulsed softly, almost like the egg was breathing, alive yet suspended. Salazar had sealed it in time itself, a failsafe, or maybe a promise to someone who'd come after him. A small smile tugged at my lips. "I think you and I might get along," I murmured. Lifting my wand, I traced the ancient magic carefully, whispering a binding rune of safekeeping. The egg shimmered once, then floated gently toward me, settling weightlessly into my pouch. Hedwig was going to throw a fit about sharing my attention, but somehow, I knew this serpent and I were meant to cross paths. As I turned back, a faint glow caught my eye, a snake-shaped sigil carved low on one of the pillars, half buried beneath layers of algae. It pulsed once when my magic brushed against it. I hissed softly in Parseltongue, the sound echoing off the stone walls. "Open for the air." The sigil hissed back and sank inward. A section of stone slid aside, revealing a hidden passage behind the wall. Inside was a narrow, circular chamber, smaller than the main chamber, but older somehow. The air felt thicker, heavier with purpose. A long desk stood in the center, covered in brittle parchment and copper sheets edged with runes. Dust floated through the air like threads of silver smoke. As soon as I stepped inside, enchanted torches flickered to life one by one. Salazar Slytherin's study. Proto-arithmancy. Old Norse runes layered with self-replicating sigils. This wasn't dark magic. This was pure structure, the mathematics of will itself. I found diagrams detailing rituals that strengthened focus, cleansed magical channels, refined spell precision, not through sacrifice, but resonance. I frowned slightly, thinking of blood curses and all the talk of purity racism on every note. I didn't expect this. This isn't dark, this is research. Understanding magic itself. There were darker notes, yes, but I schemed past them. I'd already seen enough to know this man isn't racist history painted him to be. Near the back of the desk, a small silver ring rested inside a glass case, a serpent biting its own tail. The inscription below it read: "For those who seek to understand, not control." I lifted the lid carefully. The moment my fingers brushed the ring, its surface shimmered faintly, and the letters on the scrolls around me shifted, rearranging themselves into English. A translator's ring. I couldn't help but smile. "You were clever, old man." As I stood among the relics of one of Hogwarts' founders, I felt my own magic pulse in quiet harmony with the ancient room. I wasn't just an intruder anymore. The Chamber of Secrets, and the legacy within it, now belonged to me. Okay, some comments are so annoying, like have some brain? One guy is like, "This is so wrong, you don't know she, go and read the novel and stop writing trash. Make your research well before you start writing trash. Not everyone is meant to be an author." Liston Nathan Besh. From ch3. Chill, get.a.life. I am not doing this for money. I am not an expert. Heck, this is my first novel. English isn't even my first language. I wrote this 'cause I was bored. I am doing this for fun. If you don't like it, leave. I am not here to keep you happy. Drop the novel if you will. I don't care. 911p2. Chapter 31, ch31 Yoisho. Hi. Yoa Yoi. Harry's POV *. Hogwarts life rolled on as if nothing extraordinary was happening, at least for everyone else. For me, it was like a rhythm, breezing Thorpe classes, laughter with my bois, and the echo of chamber humming in his mind every night. In Transfiguration, Professor McGonagall watched from her desk as I flicked my wand and murmured, "Reperifarge." The half-transfigured quill on my desk shimmered, twisted awkwardly, and with a soft pop, turned back into the beetle it had once been, scuttling away across the tabletop. I reversed the process again, smoothly, perfectly, no hesitation, no wasted motion. McGonagall didn't say anything. She just gave that small, tight nod she used when words weren't enough, the kind that said she'd stopped trying to measure what I could do. Ron leaned over from the next desk and whispered, "Blimey, mate, you make it look like breathing, at what time will I be able to do the same?" I smirked. "Maybe you're just holding your breath too long, as for your second question I'll just practice. Hermione looked up from her notes, quill poised mid-air. "Or maybe you're showing off again, as usual." "Moi." I raised a brow in mock offense. "Hermione, I'm merely demonstrating proper technique for the educational benefit of my peers." Ron snorted. "Educational, my arse." I grinned. "Language, mate. We're in a classroom." The bell rang, and the room dissolved into chatter and scraping chairs. Lunch in the Great Hall was the same as ever, plates clinking, laughter bouncing off the enchanted ceiling, pumpkin juice everywhere. This thing has grown up to me, everything in Hogwarts tastes better than everywhere. Hermione had her charms notes spread between the mashed potatoes and treacle tart, and Ron was halfway through a very serious discussion about the canon's defensive lineup. "Honestly, Ron," Hermione said, exasperated, "you talk about Quidditch like it's a religion." "That's because it is," I cut in before Ron could reply. "We just don't have commandments. Only penalties." Hermione rolled her eyes, muttering of course. When classes ended, we slipped into the old abandoned classroom, our unofficial training spot. What was once dusty windows, creaky floors, has transformed into a usable room with enough space to blow something up without Filch noticing for a few hours. The group had grown a lot. Dean and Seamus were dueling near the back, sparks and explosion flying between desks. Megaman would cry with joy seeing this. Parvati and Lavender were huddled over a stack of parchment, arguing about wand movements and hair charms at the same time. Susan Bones and Hannah Abbott were practicing shield spells near the windows, their magic forming faint, shaky domes of light. And Luna, well, Luna drifted in like she always did, eyes wide and dreamy, humming something that probably only made sense to her. Luna was the literal embodiment of fairy energy. She had flowers tucked in her hair and was tracing invisible patterns in the air with her wand. A lovely girl. I leaned against a desk, arms crossed, mostly watching. Ron was trying to help Seamus adjust his stance while Hermione took notes and occasionally corrected both of them. Susan called out, "Harry, can you show us that counter curse again? The one for sticking charms." I nodded and drew my wand lazily. A soft flick, no words. The air rippled, and the adhesive charm on her sleeve dissolved cleanly. "Thanks," she said, blinking. "That looked effortless." "Because it was," I replied before I could stop myself. Hannah laughed. "Show off." "Confidence," I corrected, smirking. Parvati piped up from the corner, "You make it look like you were born doing this." "I was not," I said. Luna tilted her head. "You were. Everyone's born doing magic, most just forget how." The room went quiet for a moment, everyone half unsure if she was joking. I met her eyes, she wasn't. I smiled faintly. "Well said, Luna." Hermione gave me that look, the one that said behave. "Harry, maybe, tone it down a bit. You don't need to show everything you can do." I arched a brow. "What, you mean like room of requirement training levels?" She sighed. "Exactly that. You nearly made Ron's wand explode last time." Ron grinned. "To be fair, it was worth it. I can actually cast without burning my sleeve now." "That's called progress," I said, smirking. Seamus looked between us. "So, is this what you lot do for fun? Just casually make the rest of us feel untalented?" I shrugged. "Pretty much. He groaned. Brilliant. Hermione sat down beside me, exhaling. You know, if you keep flexing like that, people will start talking. They already talk, I said, twirling my wand. Might as well give them something accurate. Ron snorted. Modest as ever. Always, I said with a grin. A little later, Susan tried a new defensive spell and ended up sending sparks across the room. Luna clapped dreamily. That was lovely. Very expressive. Hannah ducked behind her. Expressive? She nearly set my robes on fire. Art demands risk, Luna replied serenely. By the end, everyone was sweaty, laughing, and tired except me. I just watched them, correcting wand angles, refining gestures, adjusting focus. Teaching them wasn't about showing power. It was about giving them a chance to survive and maybe, just maybe, to grow into their own. Hermione caught my eye as we packed up. You're still holding back, aren't you? I smiled faintly. Never saw the need to go all out. If I don't reveal my power as the time goes on, it will be difficult for you guys to digest to show what kind of being I would have become. Harry's POV *. As soon as the tower lights dimmed, I slipped under my invisibility cloak. Muffliato. Disillusionment. Odorabulence. Silence. Invisibility. Scentlessness. Every trace of me is gone. This is getting tedious, need to start studying portals. The familiar whisper left my lips, soft and sibilant. Open. The sink shuddered, sliding aside like stone responding to breath. I stepped in, the world turning into darkness and descent, until the chamber welcomed me again. Only this time, I didn't walk. I floated, a few inches off the ground, guided by my newest runic array. Magnetic polarity carved into the soles of my shoes and fingertips, the equilibrium shifting with every twitch of intent. I'd been experimenting with it for a week, and now the movement was smooth, silent, elegant, effortless. Sure, I could fly with my magic, not like Voldy but through instinct, and I don't have to worry about magic depletion. I practically have infinite through environment, but what about others? I want to take magical to their peak, this is my way, through innovation, with my invention, and in the long run I'll control the world. Though that's still far away, anyway. The chamber, though, looked far less so. The walls were slick with moisture, the serpent carvings dim with decay, and the constant drip 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 echoed like a dying heartbeat. I grimaced. Let's fix that, shall we? A few sweeping gestures, runes drawn in the air with faint trails of blue light. I willed, Terjo, Lucerni, Ordinary. The spells rippled outward, water vanishing, grime dissolving, torches reigniting in a rhythmic sequence down the length of the hall. The Chamber of Secrets, no, my chamber now came alive. The mosaics gleamed, emerald stone shimmering like liquid glass, the carved serpents glinting with new polish. What had once been a tomb now looked like a sanctum, quiet, dignified, ancient but awake. I drifted forward until I reached the resting alcove behind Salazar's statue. The basilisk egg still pulsed within its stasis field, faintly green and impossibly alive. I crouched, placing a hand on the shimmering surface. The magic thrummed faintly beneath my palm, responding like a heartbeat. Soon, I whispered. Soon I'll wake you when I'm sure I can handle you. The egg's glow flickered once, as if it understood. I turned toward the newly restored study, the secret chamber behind the pillar that only opened to Parseltongue. The torches flared automatically when I entered, golden light reflecting off copper rune plates and parchment scrolls spread across the desk. Runedal. The heading was etched across the main scroll in fluid Old Norse script. The Song of Power. These weren't spells, they were thoughts given form. Equations of emotion, intention, and will, bound by symbols older than written words. I was no longer learning magic. I was learning how magic itself thought. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning when I worked. My wand danced, tracing lines of power through the air, each rune breathing softly with light as I tested new constructs. Ventus motus. My attempt at pure air manipulation, runic acceleration. If brooms used enchantment to fly, I would use direct force, magic, and motion woven together. Silencio runica. A sound suppression circle that masked everything within without leaving a traceable signature. Useful for sneaking, dueling, surviving. I don't need it, but my friends will. I looked up at the glowing runes floating before me, my reflection mirrored in their soft light. Scutum resonare was the shield, I murmured, tracing the air with my wand tip. Now I build the sword. The runes pulsed in response, a promise, a challenge, a living idea waiting to be born. The chamber was quiet except for the hiss of torchlight and the low hum of wards. I'd been staring at the swirling runic diagrams for hours, tracing lines between runital symbols and arithmetic vectors until my head throbbed. Apparition. Instant travel by folding space through intent. The ministry called it spatial compression. But the runes hinted at something deeper, a vibration of place. If space is an illusion of perception, I thought, then distance is just stubborn imagination. Using Slytherin's rune for connection and the Norse symbol for path, I began building a lattice of light in the air. A single glyph pulsed gold, then blue, then vanished. Nothing. The next night, I refined the alignment, added a rune of reflection, forming a loop rather than a line. When I fed it magic, the air rippled. The floor shimmered like heated glass and a circle opened, showing my dormitory on the other side. I froze. It was small, unstable, edges flickering like candlelight, but it was there, a doorway through reality. I threw a pebble. It vanished into the glow and landed on my bed upstairs. My laugh echoed through the chamber. The following week, I refined the spell every night. Each iteration drained magic like fiend fire did, but the pattern grew smoother. I no longer needed a flat wall, just a focus point and intent. When I drew the runes in the air and poured power through them, twin rings of light appeared, linked across distance. One shimmered before me in the chamber, the other hung over the black lake, stars reflecting through it. Stepping through felt like walking into a ripple. Cold air, then water scent, then freedom. Dr. Strange would be proud, I murmured to myself, grinning. By the sixth night, the portals no longer flickered. The rune set burned in my memory, viament, the path of mind. It wasn't apparition. It was thought-anchored translocation, a mental wormhole. It drained enormous power from the environment rather than my body, proof that my connection to magic's flow had become nearly infinite. When I closed the portal, the air snapped with ozone, leaving behind a faint aurora glow. In my notebook I scrawled. Viament runic translocation. Combines apparition's spatial folding with Slytherin's connection glyph. Anchored by will, stabilized by continuous magical flux. Risk, spatial bleed, temporal drag. Success rate, 82%, and 1 near drowning. H.P. I sealed the notes with a privacy charm. No one else could know, not yet. The spell wasn't ready, and the world wasn't ready either. On the seventh night, something went wrong. I had linked the chamber to the astronomy tower, testing long-range stability. The portal shimmered beautifully, wide enough to walk through without ducking. I stepped forward. Halfway through, the air rippled. My vision blurred, and for a heartbeat, I saw the same tower under a different sky, brighter, untouched by centuries. Then it snapped back, and I stumbled through. Panting, I realized what had happened. Temporal echo, I whispered. The portal doesn't just fold space, it grazes time. Of course, space-time is bound. That terrified me. Time was not to be trifled with, even Slytherin's notes warned of chronal bleed. Still, I couldn't resist documenting it. Note 47, portal drifted 0.7 seconds backward. Possible time dilation within fold. Conclusion, time and space threads are entangled in translocation. On the 8th night, a familiar whoosh of flame startled me. Fox appeared, trilling softly, wings shedding sparks. "Hey, boy," I said, wiping sweat. "You shouldn't be down here." He landed beside the runic array and sang a clear, rising note that made the glowing lines stabilize. The portal flicker vanished. My eyes widened. Of course, Phoenix song resonates in perfect harmony with magic. It's pure will. Just like my magic, of course the answer was this all along. Using his note as a reference, I etched a new rune for harmony, and the effect was immediate. The portal stabilized effortlessly, its edges clean, almost mirror smooth. I smiled. "Thank you, Fox. You just solved my entropy problem." Fox trilled once, preened his feathers, and vanished again in a burst of gold. With the new runic array path, connection, harmony, reflection, I prepared my boldest test yet, linking Hogwarts to Godric's Hollow. The magical strain was monstrous. The ground vibrated, air thick with ozone. Then the reality tore open. Through the circle, moonlight poured from a quiet graveyard. For a moment, I stood on the threshold, 1 foot in the chamber, 1 in my old village. Wind blew through both places at once. The sensation was indescribable. I stepped through, heart pounding, and appeared in the graveyard without a sound. I could feel the magic maintaining the link, fragile but stable. "Viament, the path of mind," I whispered. "It works." When I returned, the portal collapsed into a rain of silver light. I laughed quietly, exhausted, exhilarated. Runic integration successful. Runes used: path, connection, harmony, reflection, intent. Power source: external magical field resonance. Limitation: requires strong ambient magic for long distance travel. Notes: Fox song equals perfect stabilizer, Phoenix resonance aligns with harmony rune. Side effect: possible temporal drift, 0.30.7 SEC. Naming finalized: Viament, runic translocation gate. As he cleaned up, he caught his reflection in the pool of still water beneath Slytherin's statue. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, faint sparks of residual magic flickered across his skin. He chuckled softly. Hermione would kill me if she knew I was warping space-time in a sewer, or well before it changed it. He turned to the sealed chamber wall, tracing the snake sigil with a finger. "Slytherin, you were centuries ahead. But I'll go further." The runes glowed faintly at his touch, as if the founder himself approved. "Tell me how you like the portal thing." I took inspiration from Portal 2 game and Marvel Mystic Arts. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to comment. I'll answer it in the next chapter, which will be a Q&A. CA 911P2 Chapter 32, CH32 Portal? Nah, I'll teleport instead. Harry's POV *. I'd stopped counting hours. Down here, time didn't matter, only rhythm. Breath, runes, spell, repeat. The chamber had become both my laboratory and my meditation hall. The floor was a galaxy of runes now, each one glowing like a faint star. Lines of light connected them in slow, steady pulses that matched my heartbeat. Every flicker meant progress, or failure. My portals still weren't right. They worked, technically, but they were inefficient. Sloppy. They suck magic more than your mum suck ma cough. Sorry, I mean they drain magic like crazy, even with Fox's harmony rune stabilizing the core. If not for my infinite magic, and ley lines in Hogwarts, I would have died several times for magical exhaustion. The energy dispersion alone could light up the castle on the magical radar if anyone ever checked. Too big. Too messy. Too loud. I wanted elegance. I wanted control. I wanted something portable, a portal that could fold into my palm, open like a thought, and close before anyone even realized it had been there. Not power for destruction. Power for precision. Something that was mine alone. I studied the runic pattern again: path, connection, harmony, reflection, intent. It worked, but the energy feedback was linear. The portal opened between fixed points, not between states of being. If apparition breaks you down and reassembles you through space, I muttered, then runes can do it better. Not destruction but translation. I reached for Slytherin's notes. The parchment was ancient, filled with theories about transcending form through intent. I combined that with modern arithmancy, especially the wave field principle of spell movement, and slowly began to rewrite the array. I replaced connection with unity, the rune of merging will and location. Then modified reflection into echo, representing the universe's feedback loop. The resulting symbol pulsed faintly, almost as if alive. No portal. No fold. Just a shift of frequency. I stood in the center of the array, eyes closed. I pictured the Gravender common room, the smell of fireplace ash, the creak of old wood, the precise feel of the air there. Then I spoke softly, not in Latin, but in pure intent. Via mentis. The world folded in on itself, not violently, not like apparition's ripping tug, but smoothly, like silk sliding through my fingers. One heartbeat later, I opened my eyes to the flicker of the common room fire. No sound. No flash. No burn of magical exhaustion. Just being. My breath stopped. I turned in a full circle, touching the familiar walls. Then, with a grin, I focused back on the chamber and whispered again. Via mentis. Reality blurred, and I was standing beneath Slytherin's stone face once more. I repeated the process dozens of times that night, refining the spell. Each jump grew cleaner, faster, quieter. By dawn, I could cross the castle in under a second, my magic barely depleted. I added safety measures. The spell would refuse to activate if the destination was blocked by a solid surface or if I wasn't fully conscious. My notes read like a scientist's manifesto. Via mentis, the path of mind. Mechanism: runic phase shift aligning user's magical signature with spatial resonance of target location. Energy cost: minimal if location is well known and magically mapped. Risks: none observed. Splinching impossible because the spell relies on conscious projection, not physical reassembly. Derived from Runettle and arithmetic frequency equation, AFE. Alias: the trump card. That night, as I sat by the basilisk skeleton beneath the chamber's cold glow, I smiled faintly at my open notebook. No more limitations, I whispered. No more cages, magical or otherwise. The runes shimmered softly, echoing my words. Via mentis, the path of mind. A spell that could take me anywhere, silently, perfectly, without a trace. A spell that would one day decide the outcome of wars. My trump card. The next night, the chamber's stone floor was lined with glowing runic circles. I had cleared a wide area enough for spell duels, elemental bursts, and something more dangerous. Time dilation fields. I wasn't just experimenting anymore. I was training the spell for battle. I marked a shimmering boundary, the perimeter of my testing arena, and conjured 3 animated dummies from enchanted basalt. Each one was imbued with offensive routines from future Lockhart's dueling club curriculum, except these were actually competent. As the first dummy raised its wand and fired a streak of reducto, I didn't block. I blinked out of existence, appearing behind it, wand already humming with energy. Via mentis, reaction time, 0.37 seconds, I murmured, deflecting another curse mid-turn. A second dummy fired a chain of hexes. I snapped a wrist, scutum resonare flared. The dummy's own stinging hex ricocheted perfectly back, blasting its chest to dust. Feedback stable. Harmonized response with teleport frequency confirmed, I muttered, jotting runic data in the air with a spell that left glowing notes. Then I tested the combo. Teleport shield counter blast. Feint teleport decoy illusion disarm. I refined it until the entire fight looked like a dance: flicker, flash, vanish, reappear, movement guided by thought alone. By the 20th repetition, I no longer whispered the incantation. The spell now was stable and responded to intent alone, the final sign of true spell. I didn't need this. I could have brute forced this with my instinct and magic. But this isn't for me alone. This is for my legacy. My future family. I sat cross-legged afterward, breathing slowly, feeling for magical depletion, stopping passive absorption of magic. Normally, 3 apparitions could leave even seasoned wizards light-headed. But Viamentus used barely more power than Lumos. Spatial folding through harmonic resonance. I whispered, tracing a sigil in the air. If magic is sound, this spell is music. I looked at the runic inscriptions on the wall, half amused. Slytherin, you would have liked this. To push limits, I layered multiple scutum resonare shields, one reflecting, one absorbing, one refracting. Then I teleport between them at near lightning speed, forcing my magic to sync in real time. Each move left a faint afterimage, ripples of distorted air. By synchronizing my shields with Viamentus, I created what my notes called resonant phase defense. A state where I could be both there and not there for a fraction of a second, letting attacks pass through harmlessly. When one stray blast hit the wall and melted stone, I just smirked. Yet, definitely not teaching this to anyone. The final experiment was the riskiest. Time distortion. I had once read in the restricted section from Roar that energy flux at teleportation thresholds could bend temporal flow if pushed too hard. I didn't want to time travel, but I did want to test whether my runic modulation could suspend time for a microsecond, useful for reaction timing. I adjusted the portal sigil slightly, added the Laguz rune, flow, bound it with Ewaz, movement, and wove it into the teleport anchor. I exhaled and cast. The world froze. Dust hung in midair like amber. Water dripped from the side chamber ceiling and never touched the floor. For that fraction of a heartbeat, I stood outside of time. When motion resumed, the droplet hit stone, and my grin turned sharp. Confirmed. Temporal lag, 0.003 seconds. Enough to dodge even a killing curse. I flexed my fingers. Trump card just got an upgrade. By dawn, I had mapped the spell's complete matrix on enchanted parchment. Dozens of runic layers forming something that looked like the blueprints of a universe. I leaned back against a stone pillar, exhausted but exhilarated. Phase synchronization successful, time drift stabilized. And I still haven't run out of magic. I laughed quietly to myself. I'm a cheat. The basilisk head loomed above, silent witness to my progress. Nice decoration if you ask me. I closed my eyes, murmuring. Viamentus, my ace in the hole. And as I vanished, leaving the chamber silent once more, a faint hum lingered in the air, the echo of a spell that should not have been possible. Dumbledore POV**. Come in, my boy. Harry entered, calm as ever. He wasn't even surprised. In fact, I think he had been expecting this conversation for days. Fawkes trilled softly from his perch. The fire crackled. The room smelled faintly of lemon drops and ozone. I gestured toward the seat opposite my desk. Lemon drop. He smirked. You always try to soften interrogations with sugar. My eyes twinkled faintly. Only for students who make professors question the laws of physics. I leaned forward. Harry, what exactly have you been doing these past weeks? The castle reports, fluctuations. Spatial distortions. I suspect you've been working on something far beyond your coursework. He raised an eyebrow, pretending to think. Well, I was experimenting with tea leaves once. The kettle exploded. That count? I sighed, amused and exasperated at once. Harry. All right, all right. He leaned back, tone shifting to playful seriousness. Let's just say I've been creative. Creative, I repeated, studying him. And these incidents where you appear to vanish. His smirk widened. Trade secret. My gaze sharpened. Might you indulge an old man's curiosity? Without answering, he raised his hand. The air folded. One blink, and he was standing near the bookshelf by the phoenix's perch, flipping through an old tome like he'd always been there. Fox chirped once, wings fluffing in surprise. No incantation, no focus stone, not even a flicker of magical signature, I murmured, astounded. He closed the book gently, smirk playing on his lips. I call it being a genius. I chuckled, half in disbelief, half in awe. My dear boy, even apparition leaves traces. You did not apparate. He tapped his temple. Didn't need to. Then what did you do? He just grinned, all mischief and mystery. My trump card, Professor. Let's keep it at that. I leaned back, long fingers steepled beneath my chin, eyes twinkling with genuine intrigue now. You realize you've created something no wizard has ever achieved. He shrugged casually. I just stopped letting magic boss me around. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Behind my calm face, my mind raced. Spatial folding without anchor. No magical trace. No drain. Instantaneous transition. Not even Merlin could. I broke off the thought, smiling faintly. I should perhaps start keeping you under observation. He smirked. Too late for that. I'm already faster than your wards. I raised an eyebrow. Cheek and hubris. A deadly combination. Add curiosity, he said lightly. That's what makes it fun. I finally sighed, shaking my head in wonder. Very well. Keep your secrets, Mr. Potter. But remember, every trump card can become a trap if you don't respect it. He nodded, his grin softening into something thoughtful. I know. That's why I'm still refining it. Refining, I repeated. Heaven help us all. He gave a mock salute and turned to leave. As the door closed behind him, my smile faded into a contemplative frown. He's playing with something beyond comprehension. The last time I saw this kind of boundary-breaking magic, was Grindelwald. I still remember London being engulfed by blue flames. Except this boy doesn't seek power. He seeks understanding. I looked toward the window where the moonlight spilled across my desk. What on earth are you becoming, Harry Potter? You. I know update was a little late than usual. Well, she happens. Also, since there is little to no poll for 2 to 3 YRS because of butterfly effect, I let some brainstorming and put up an arc, original but realistic. It will start after the whole Parseltongue reveal. Spoiler alert, it will first shadow something big. Let's see if you figure it out. CA-911P2 Chapter 33, CH33 Plot thickens. Harry's POV***. Months had passed since my talk with Dumbledore. Months since I had walked out of that office grinning like a cat who'd swallowed a secret. The world, for now, was calm. Quidditch practice, homework, and Lockhart's glitter-filled brainrot lectures, business as usual. No basilisk, no creeping terror in the halls. Just the dull hum of Hogwarts life. But calm, for me, was never simple. It was a break, a thin layer of normality stretched over a brain constantly stuffed with runes, theory, and the faint thrill of creation. Mate, you look like you haven't slept, Ron said through a mouthful of toast. I absently stirred my French toast with my fork, hovering mid-air, pretending the syrup was a liquid conductor for my thoughts. Sleep's a social construct invented by wizards who couldn't transfigure their own exhaustion. Hermione snorted, rolling her eyes so hard I could almost hear them. You're quoting your own nonsense now. Self-citation, I said, giving her a sly look. Makes it sound smarter. She huffed, trying not to smile. Ron, of course, snorted pumpkin juice through his nose, nearly choking on the sugar rush. Across the hall, Fred and George were reenacting a slow-motion bludger strike on Lee Jordan, complete with theatrical screams and wind-up gestures. I flicked my fork casually, it clinked against George's plate with perfect comedic timing. Fred froze mid-scream. Oi, Potter! Ever thought of joining us professionally? I shrugged, grinning. Can't. Ministry regulations. I am too powerful, too humble. Too humble. Hermione shot me a look that could level walls. What? Humble is my second name. Self-aware modesty, I explained. It's an advanced magical discipline. Requires years of practice. You wouldn't understand. Fred blinked. Right, advanced modesty. Sure, mate. I winked, leaning back. Exactly. It's a dangerous skill. Might accidentally turn the world into a polite utopia if mastered. Ron groaned, shaking his head. You're impossible. Thank you, I said with mock gravitas, stabbing a bite of French toast. I try. Hermione groaned, muttering something about needing a sugar drink, and I caught Ron trying not to laugh as syrup dripped onto the table. Normal Hogwarts chaos, but somehow, perfect. Oh, I am gonna miss these days. Days blurred into an oddly peaceful pattern, not boring, just disciplined. Our daily schedule was packed: transfiguration before lunch, charms after, potions at the end, and then Dada Club at night. Somewhere in between, the room of requirement became our private gym for magic, a place where I could push limits no one suspected. McGonagall had us practicing the softening charm and Avifers again. Everyone groaned, except me. I was bored enough to turn my quill into a phoenix feather mid-lesson and back. Show off, Ron muttered under his breath, eyeing me like I'd just cursed his breakfast. Efficiency, I corrected, grinning. Transfiguration's like cooking. Get the recipe right, and the plating's the fun part. McGonagall arched an eyebrow but said nothing. The corners of her mouth twitched. I swear, if she smiled any harder, she'd break her own sternness record. Kitty, kitty, kitty. Flitwick's lecture on shrinking charms ended with Hermione accidentally shrinking Ron's bag. He shot her a glare that could strip wallpaper. I, of course, enlarged it again, wandlessly, because why not? Perfect reversal, Mr. Potter, Flitwick squeaked, sounding half alarmed, half delighted. Practice, I said, shrugging. And a healthy dose of curiosity. Never underestimate curiosity. Hermione muttered something about reckless lunacy, and Ron just groaned, shaking his head. Reckless? I said, wagging a finger. I prefer experimental. Ron snorted. Yeah, experimental till the ceiling falls on us. My lip twitched. In our makeshift Dada Club, our little group had grown. Dean, Seamus, Lavender, Parvati, the Paddle Twins, Luna, Terry Boot, Daphne Greengrass, Tracy Davis, Blaise Zabinai, Susan Bones, Hannah Abbott, about 16 strong now. They gathered in flickering candlelight while I stood at the front, not as the boy who lived, but as, well, as someone who actually knew what they were doing. Werewolves, yetis, imps, textbook stuff, I said, levitating 3 illustrated cutouts lazily. Let's talk real defense, reaction time, mental control, and intent. Luna's hand floated up like it had a mind of its own. What about spectral entities driven by emotional imbalance? I grinned. You mean my classmates before exams? The room chuckled. Even Daphne cracked a smile, though Tracy elbowed her for it. Susan piped up next. Harry, is there a way to block them without a wand? Susan with her usual shield questions. Amelia would be proud. I waved my hand, and a faint shimmer of protective light surrounded the nearest practice dummy. See? It's not about pointing your wand. It's about feeling the magic, directing it before you even think. Magic's a muscle, I told them, circling the room. You don't command it, you train it. If you force it, you break it. But train it, and it moves with you. Does it grow if I feed it spinach? Seamus muttered, grinning. Only if you also do 10 push-ups per hex, I said, not even slowing my pace. Magical muscles respond to discipline, not shortcuts. Hermione frowned slightly. Don't show off too much, Harry. Remember, some of us can't just bend magic to our will like that. I shrugged. Fine. But you can feel it. Watch the intention, not the wand. That's all I'm doing. Dean piped up. So you're saying I could actually fight a werewolf with my mind? I winked. Maybe. But if your mind's too busy thinking about chocolate frogs, probably not. Ron snorted, snickering, while Lavender and Parvati whispered behind their hands. By the end of the night, I was adjusting stances, fine-tuning incantations, showing them how to listen to magic, not shout at it. I passed from group to group, nudging shoulders, tilting wands, demonstrating without effort. And every once in a while, I'd glance at the way they watched, wide-eyed, awed, trying to hide it. Half of them had already seen me do magic without moving my wand. The other half were about to. Ready for one more round of counterspells? I asked, twirling my wand lazily for show. Yes, they chorused. Excellent, I said, smiling to myself. And remember, magic's a muscle. You train it, or it trains you. The dungeon smelled of boiled nettles and old stone, that familiar mix that always made me feel like I was on the edge of something unpleasant. Snape drifted past like an oily bat, robes matching vampire fashion. Hair-raising potion, class, he announced, voice sharp enough to slice through egos. Ingredients listed. I expect competence. Though, honestly, I won't be surprised if most of you fail miserably. I smirked and got to work, stirring slowly, deliberately, letting the potion thrum under my wandless guidance. Hermione matched me stir for stir, whispering corrections here and there, though I could tell she was trying not to look impressed. When Snape stopped by, I felt his gaze press like cold steel. He peered into my cauldron and paused. The potion shimmered a faint, perfect blue instead of the dull grey that plagued the others. Curious, he murmured, voice soft but sharp enough to make my spine straighten. Since this year, you've been improving recipes. I kept my eyes level with his, tilting my head slightly. Just noting efficiency, sir. Better to spend less magic for more effect. His eyes flicked to the side pocket at my hip, the black notebook bound in dragon hide, scribbled with runes, formulas, and little tweaks to everything we brewed. I see, he said slowly, like he was tasting something sour yet fascinating. A diary of refinement. How nostalgic. I shrugged casually. We all learn from someone, sir. Even old masters like you. He didn't respond right away. For a fraction of a second, his lip twitched, not quite anger, not quite pride, more like recognition. Then he swept away, disappearing into the shadows with a soft swish of his robes. I whispered to Hermione, leaning close. I think he's impressed. Or plotting my death. Hard to tell. She rolled her eyes. You're impossible. Me? Never. I'm just exceptionally efficient. I grinned, tapping the side of my cauldron. And saving magic while looking good doing it. Hermione snorted, muttering something about show-offs and their endless arrogance. I pretended not to hear, already plotting how to refine the next potion even further. Nightly, we trained in the roar. The floor shimmered like polished obsidian, and the candles floating around us, syncing in rhythm with our breathing. I watched Ron struggle to levitate a quill, the thing spinning like it had a vendetta against him. Focus on pull, not push, I said, trying to keep my tone patient. You're forcing magic out, not letting it breathe through you. He groaned and muttered, mate, it's breathing through me, and it wants me dead. Hermione, of course, managed a perfect shield without touching her wand. I grinned. Not bad. You'll be terrifying in a month. Or at least mildly intimidating. Ron flopped against the wall, wiping sweat from his forehead. Mate, I already am terrifying. To my muscles. I raised an eyebrow. Sure, terrifying enough to scare small furniture. Hermione laughed, shaking her head. You're doing fine, Ron. At least you're not blowing up half the room this time. I sat down cross-legged, folding my hands over my knees. Don't mock the furniture. It died bravely. Stood there, absorbing magical backlash like a champ. Ron snorted. Yet, brave little coffee table. May it haunt you in the night. Hermione rolled her eyes but smiled. Honestly, Harry, sometimes I think you enjoy watching us struggle just to lecture us. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. Me? Never. I'm just providing morally sound guidance. Plus, it's funny watching Ron fight a quill like it's a Hungarian horntail. He growled. I'll get you back for that. I smirked. I'm counting on it. Makes training more lively. And so we continued, the roar pulsing with our attempts, mistakes, and laughter. By the end of October, Quidditch season was in full swing. Gryffindor v/S Slytherin. I hovered midair on my Nimbus 2000, feeling the wind in my face and the adrenaline in my veins. Malfoy was smirking across the pitch, perfectly poised in his Nimbus 2001 broom like a smug peacock. Try not to fall off your outdated broom, Potter, he called, voice dripping with malice. I smirked back. Try not to cry when I lap you. Minutes later, the bewitched bludger came screaming toward me. I didn't dodge deliberately. Harry, no! Ron shouted from the stands. Harry! Hermione screamed, her voice cracking. Impact hit hard. My arm cracked cleanly, and I felt the bone shift like a snapping twig. I tumbled midair but, in that same chaotic moment, I caught the snitch. My body slammed into the ground, but I grinned through the pain anyway. Your plan worked, Dobby, now you have no choice but to visit me. Madam Hooch blew the whistle. Potter caught the snitch. Gryffindor wins. Hermione came sprinting down the stands, eyes wide with horror. Harry! Your arm! I waved my good hand lazily. All part of the plan, I joked. Though she didn't know it wasn't. Plan, she sputtered. Your bone's broken. I just winked. Exactly. Before I could breathe, Lockhart swooped down from the stands, hair gleaming in the sunlight. Ah, Harry, my boy. Nothing a simple spell can't fix. He raised his wand dramatically, clearly imagining a cinematic flourish. I sidestepped, wagging a finger. Not this time, Lockhart. Why, he blinked, unsure. I shouted, Hooch. Madam Hooch swooped in like a hawk, glaring at Lockhart. Step aside, Gilderoy. Potter, move. I let her guide me to the edge of the pitch. Thank you, Hooch. And do tell him, please, that broomstick heroics aren't an invitation for wandless first aid. Lockhart trailed behind, pouting like a wounded peacock. I could have fixed it, you know. Instantly. I shot him a pointed look. You could have made it worse, and honestly. I like my bones where they are. Hermione wrapped her arm around my shoulders, steadying me. Honestly, you're impossible. I grinned, ignoring the throbbing in my arm. But lovable. That night, after Madame Pomfrey had fussed over my arm and practically glued it back together with a lecture on reckless behavior, I feigned sleep until the ward went quiet. Then I whispered, "Come on out." A pair of tennis ball eyes peeked through the curtain, wide and terrified. "Harry Potter, sir." Dobby is ashamed. I raised a hand gently. "Relax. I know it was you. I also know why." Dobby's ears drooped so low I thought they might touch the floor. Dobby only wanted to keep Harry Potter safe. Dobby's plans, they failed. I shook my head. They worked. My voice softened. "The basilisk is gone. Hogwarts is safe." He froze, trembling like a leaf in a storm. It is." I nodded. "I ended it. But there's something you can do for me now." Dobby blinked, unsure. "Anything, sir?" "Keep watching me," I said, leaning closer. Quietly. "Learn. Your freedom's coming soon." His little eyes shimmered, like he caught a hint of something bigger than he could understand. "Dobby, can he truly be free?" I smirked faintly. "Depends on if you're willing to take a few risks for it." Dobby's ears twitched nervously. "Dobby will try, sir." I reached out and rested a hand on his head. "When it happens, I'll make sure you never serve anyone again, unless you choose to." The elf burst into happy tears, sniffling like a human who just realized they'd won the lottery. I leaned back against the bed, glancing at the moonlight filtering through the infirmary windows. "Magic," I whispered to the quiet room, "starts with choice." Dobby peeked at me through wet lashes. "Harry Potter is clever, sir, and kind." I chuckled. "Don't let it go to your head, Dobby. You're not allowed to tell everyone that, or I'll deny it." He giggled, a small, joyful sound. "Dobby never tell, sir." I grinned faintly, letting the calm wash over me. Even in a world full of snakes, basilisk bones, and dangerous spells, I realized something. Some magic, the real magic, was simple. Choice. Trust. Freedom. I sound like fucking Dumbledore now. Chapter 34, ch 34 Bravest Man? My ass. Harry's POV *. By mid-November, Hogwarts was buzzing with Lockhart's latest disaster of an idea. A dueling club. Because apparently, Ron said dryly as we headed toward the Great Hall, what this school really needed was supervised violence. I snorted. To be fair, it's still less dangerous than his last idea. "Remember the pixies?" "Barely," Ron muttered. "I'm still finding blue hair in my robes." Hermione sighed like she was already regretting associating with us. "Honestly, you two, this could actually be useful. It's a chance to learn self-defense, proper spell work, discipline." "Discipline," I said. He once signed a fan letter to himself. When we entered the Great Hall, I nearly laughed aloud. The long tables had been pushed aside, candles floating in dramatic formation, and the air smelled faintly of cologne and overconfidence. Lockhart was standing on a platform beside Snape, one looking like a walking Valentine's card, the other like he was plotting a bloody homicide. "If I die," I muttered, "bury me under Snape's patience." Hermione smirked. "You think he has any left?" Snape's eyes swept the crowd like he was searching for someone to hex just for breathing too loudly. Lockhart, meanwhile, was practically glowing, both literally and metaphorically, his lilac robes glimmering under the enchanted light. "Gather round, young duelists," he trilled, twirling his wand like a parade baton. "Now, to demonstrate the proper form of a duel, I shall be assisted by my esteemed colleague, Professor Snape, who has graciously volunteered." Under protest, Snape said, voice colder than a Dementor's exhale. Lockhart gave a breezy laugh. "Oh, Severus. Always so modest." Snape raised one eyebrow, a clear promise that modesty was not the reason for his silence. "Wands at the ready," Lockhart called dramatically. "We'll begin with a simple disarming charm." "Nothing to worry about, students. I leaned toward Ron. That's what he said before the pixies. Ron grinned. Maybe this time he's the one getting disarmed. 3, 2, 1. Expelliarmus. Snape didn't wait for the word one. A streak of red light burst from his wand and hit Lockhart square in the chest. Lockhart's wand shot into the air, followed closely by Lockhart himself, before both landed in a glittery heap against the far wall. His robes puffed up like a deflating balloon as he slid down, leaving a faint sparkle trail on the stone. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft tink of glitter drifting to the floor. I clapped, slow and polite. I learned so much. Ron leaned closer, whispering, "Fastest lesson I've ever seen." Hermione tried not to laugh, but the corners of her mouth betrayed her. "You two are impossible." "Maybe," I said, grinning at Lockhart as he struggled to stand, hair full of sparkles and pride full of holes. "But we're surviving Hogwarts, so I call that advanced magic." Pairs were being called out, and of course, I ended up facing Malfoy. "Try not to embarrass yourself this time, Potter," he drawled, wand twirling between his fingers like he thought he was in a play. I gave him a calm smile. "No promises. I like keeping expectations low." We stepped onto the platform, bowed, well, I bowed with exaggerated grace, nearly tripping just to see his expression, and raised our wands. Lockhart shouted from the sidelines, "On my count 3, 2. Malfoy didn't even wait for one. "Serpent Sortia." His wand spat out a green serpent that hit the floor with a wet thud before uncoiling with a furious hiss. The thing was long, sleek, and entirely too pleased with itself. Gasps echoed through the great hall. Some kids climbed onto tables. Lockhart, predictably, panicked forward, waving his wand. "I'll just..." I raised my hand. "Don't." He froze mid-step, looking at me like I'd just forbidden him from brushing his own teeth. I ignored him. The snake hissed again, coiling tighter. It was about to strike at Justin Finch-Fletchley, who looked like he'd just realized he didn't want to learn dueling after all. I took a slow breath, focusing. I didn't decide to speak Parseltongue, it just slipped out, quiet and natural, like sighing. "Stop," I said. The sound wasn't English. It was low and sharp, like words made of water and teeth. The snake froze mid-lunge, eyes flicking to me, not hostile, just listening. The hall went dead silent. I could hear someone whisper, "He's speaking, what is that?" Malfoy blinked, genuinely confused. You can talk to snakes." I looked back at him, completely straight-faced. "Can't everyone?" That earned me nothing but horrified stares. Hermione looked torn between scientific fascination and mild panic, while Ron looked like I'd just told him I was secretly a garden hose. Justin stumbled backward, pale as nearly headless Nick. The snake, still motionless, swayed slightly as if waiting for my next order. I sighed. "All right then. Finite incantatum." Green smoke curled, and the snake dissolved into nothing. The tension cracked like glass, people whispering, others still frozen in place. I turned to Justin. "You all right?" He hesitated, glancing between me and the spot where the snake had been. "Yeah. I think so." I nodded, offering a faint grin. "Good. Next time, duck first, panic later." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Even some Slytherins cracked smiles. I swear Snape's eyebrow twitched, which, by his standards, was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Lockhart finally recovered enough to clap his hands together. "Marvelous control. Just marvelous." I muttered under my breath, "You're welcome for not dying." Ron leaned over as we left the platform. "Mate, that was bloody hell." "You spoke snake." Hermione whispered, "Harry, that wasn't just any magic, that was Parseltongue." "Okay, act like I didn't know anything." I shrugged, still feeling the echo of the hiss in my throat. Guess I'm more bilingual than I thought. Ron stared at me like I'd grown fangs. Yeah, well, next time, warn us before you go full serpent whisperer, all right. Deal, I said, smirking. Though, to be fair, it did make for a great exit. But after the club ended, I didn't even make it halfway up the stairs before Potter. That voice could freeze lava. Smooth, cold, and somehow always made me feel like I'd just been caught stealing ingredients from his private stores. I turned, trying for casual. Professor. Follow me. No room for argument, no emotion, just quiet authority that somehow made my spine straighten on instinct. The walk to his office was silent except for the echo of our footsteps on the stone. Every turn, every corridor, felt like a slow descent into judgment. When the door closed behind me, the faint shimmer of wards sealed us in. The greasy bat didn't even look at me at first, he just circled, robes whispering, his presence thick like smoke. You enjoyed that attention, didn't you? He said finally. A grand display in front of the entire school. A parcel mouth, flaunting his power. I tilted my head, half smiling. I didn't flaunt anything. I stopped a snake from biting a kid. Thought that was in the Good Samaritan column. His eyes flashed. You spoke the language of a dark wizard, Potter. I couldn't help it, I smirked. You mean you did, once? That landed like a silent spell. His face went still, all sharp lines and unreadable eyes. For a second, I thought he might hex me on instinct. Then, very quietly, he said, you know. I nodded, meeting his gaze evenly. I've known for a while. Your reaction told the rest. Can't sell Dumbledore trust for this she. Snape froze. Completely. His breathing changed, just slightly, the kind of reaction you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. I took a small step forward, not out of defiance, but honesty. I know what you did. The prophecy. The regret. The reason you switched sides. You think I don't understand, but I do. His eyes flicked to mine, black and searching. And what, precisely, do you understand? That you're trying to atone for something you can't undo, I said quietly. That you hate yourself more than you ever hated my father. And that, underneath all the bitterness and sarcasm, you're the bravest man I've ever met. Bravest man? My ass. He is a man-child who shouldn't even be close to children. Heck, he hates children and teaching to the core. He is stubborn, rude, and pathetic racist who calls his best friend a racist slur. A war criminal, a Death Eater who sold his respect the second he get that dark mark. But, he is not evil. He was abused by his alcoholic father, his neglecting mother, his Slytherin classmates being the biggest assholes. He is a survivor, who survived being a half-blood in Slytherin with no support or money. And he broke down when he saw his best friend smiling on his most embarrassing day on the hands of his bullies. Then why did I say those words? Because he swore to protect me. He is useful. And I don't want a person to have hostility with me for the next 5 years for no reason. Snape didn't move for a long time. The silence was heavy, stretching out like a held breath. His jaw worked slightly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes weren't cruel. Not anymore. Good talk no jutsu worked. When he finally spoke, his voice wasn't cold. It was low, tired, human. You shouldn't know these things. I shrugged faintly. Too late. For a heartbeat, something passed between us, not forgiveness, not even understanding, but maybe recognition. Two people who'd seen too much, carrying ghosts they didn't ask for. Snape turned away first, his back rigid. Go, Potter. Before I start thinking you have a redeeming quality. I smiled a little. Wouldn't want to ruin your reputation, sir. As I left, I swear I caught the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth. It might have been a smirk. Or maybe I imagined it. Either way, it felt like progress. Back in the Gryffindor common room, the fire crackled softly, that perfect, low, steady hum that made the whole tower feel like it was breathing. The place smelled faintly of smoke and buttered biscuits, which was probably because Ron had a plate of them balanced on his knees. Hermione was curled up on the sofa, a book half open in her lap, her expression somewhere between concern and mild exasperation. When I sank into the armchair beside them, she immediately looked up. "You all right?" "Snape didn't." I grinned. "Didn't what?" "Hex me? Emotionally scar me? Monologue about the sanctity of potion brewing." I waved a hand. "Nah." He just glared, insulted, and emotionally imploded. "So, yeah, productive night?" Ron nearly choked on his biscuit. "You've got a death wish, mate." I smirked. "Or good timing. Depends on how you frame it." Hermione sighed, snapping her book shut. "Honestly, Harry, you keep talking to him like that, one day he'll actually curse you into next week." "Please," I said, leaning back, stretching my legs toward the fire. "If he wanted to curse me, he'd have done it already. I think he's starting to enjoy our little chats. Therapeutic, even." Ron snorted. "Therapeutic? For him or you?" "Both," I said easily. "He gets to vent his lifelong frustration, and I get a crash course in advanced snark. It's practically mutual growth." Hermione pinched the bridge of her nose, but she was smiling, the kind of tired, fond smile that said, "You're insane, but I'm used to it." "You're impossible," she muttered. I grinned at the fire, the orange glow flickering across the common room walls. "Nah," I said quietly, "just inevitable." For a moment, none of us spoke. Ron broke the silence by reaching for another biscuit. "Well, inevitable or not," he said, "if you keep poking Snape like that, at least let me know first. I'll bring popcorn." I laughed. "Deal." Dumbledore POV***. Up in my tower office, I stood before the pensieve, the silvery surface rippling like thought-made liquid. It reflected me in fragments, lines of age, worry, and something dangerously close to admiration. I had seen what the boy could do. What I could once only dream of doing and, more importantly, what he chose not to do. Harry Potter. He walked a knife's edge, that one. Power that defied all known structure, yet wielded with the restraint of someone far older, or perhaps far more wounded. Wisdom beyond his years, power beyond reason, and still, tethered by conscience. Still human. But I could feel it, that faint, electric tension beneath the surface of reality itself. His magic moved like a storm waiting for permission to break. I traced the pensieve's rim, watching memories swirl, flashes of green light, a serpent, a broken boy with his mother's eyes and his father's defiance. He was no longer just a student. He was becoming something else. And yet, I could not decide whether the world should be afraid of that, or grateful. The storm is coming, I thought, and when it breaks, may we all have the sense to stand in its shadow, not against it. The next morning, breakfast at the high table was its usual chaos of clinking cutlery, floating owls, and the faint sound of Weasleys trying to weaponize marmalade. I was halfway through buttering a scone when a regal tawny owl swept down the length of the great hall. Its feathers shining like molten bronze, its wings beating with aristocratic grace. Not a school owl, no, this one carried the air of old authority. The envelope it dropped before me was sealed in dark green wax, bound with a golden thread. "Interesting," I murmured, setting down my knife. "One does not often receive mail that looks like it might hex you for reading it too slowly." To my left, Professor McGonagall arched an eyebrow. "Albus, that owl isn't from the Ministry, is it?" "In a manner of speaking," I said, carefully breaking the seal. "An older branch, the kind that likes to think it still controls the roots. At the Gryffindor table, Harry was blissfully unaware, arguing with Ron, spoon in hand, face animated. "I'm just saying," he was telling him, "if you used a time turner as an alarm clock, it'd wake you up before you went to bed. Technically, you'd never be late again." Hermione pinched the bridge of her nose. "That's not how it works, Harry." Ron grinned. No, I think he's onto something." "Infinite naps." I smiled faintly. Even apocalypse correspondence couldn't quite ruin the absurd warmth of breakfast at Hogwarts. Then my gaze fell back to the parchment. The wax bore an ancient insignia, 2 serpents entwined around an eye of emerald. My heart stilled. It had been decades since I'd seen that mark. The Serpent Council. A name whispered, not spoken, in wizarding politics, old bloodlines and secret orders, the kind that preferred influence to visibility. They rarely surfaced unless something truly unnatural occurred. And if they were contacting me now, it meant they had noticed something, someone, they could not explain. Harry Potter. I refolded the letter carefully, the scone forgotten. "Well," I murmured to myself, "it appears the world has started watching again." McGonagall gave me a questioning look. "Nothing urgent," I said lightly, rising from my seat. "Just old acquaintances seeking conversation. I suspect it won't be pleasant." As I left the hall, the chatter of breakfast faded behind me. I could still hear Harry laughing about paradoxes and missed alarms, and, for a moment, I envied that innocence. The letter felt heavier with each step. The Serpent Council wanted to talk. And they never called without reason. Boom. The Serpent Council here he he. 911p2. Chapter 35, ch35 Butterfly Effect. Harry's POV. By February, Hogwarts had gone back to pretending everything was fine. Just classes, homework, and Ron snoring loud enough to wake the portraits. I didn't mind the normalcy. After everything that happened last year, well, let's just say I'd earned a few quiet breakfasts. My life had found a rhythm again, transfiguration in the morning, Dumbledore's tutoring on the Sundays, and my own projects in between. Dumbledore didn't call them projects, of course. He called them dangerous, fascinating ideas that could potentially dismantle reality if done wrong. I called them fun. Under Dumbledore's guidance, I'd gone through dueling drills sharp enough to make Flitwick proud. Learned to shape fire into a shield through battle transfiguration, studied ancient runes and alchemical sigils. And solved more arithmancy equations than was morally acceptable for a teenager. Basically, I was getting the education of a Hogwarts graduate with none of the breaks. Worth it, though. Because with every session, I could feel it, that click when magic stops being something you cast, and starts being something you are. It was a Friday morning when the first hint of trouble showed up. I'd just stolen a bite of toast off Ron's plate when a large, official-looking owl swooped down and dropped a sealed letter in front of Dumbledore. Heavy parchment. Gold thread. Serpent insignia. The Great Hall went quiet. Dumbledore broke the seal, read, and his expression barely changed, but his eyes did lost some twinkling, the calm before a storm thing. Ron nudged me. "What's that about?" "No idea," I lied. "The crest told me enough, something old. Obsolete, supposedly. But if trouble is back, I'll give them trouble in return." That evening, I was summoned to Dumbledore's office. As if that wasn't obvious. When Fawkes appeared beside me in a shimmer of red gold feathers, I didn't even bother pretending it was for tea. Dumbledore looked up as I entered. "Ah, Harry. Thank you for coming." He gestured for me to sit. The air in the office felt thick. "The Serpent Council, an old group with no leverage," he began, "has requested a meeting. The Ministry will be in attendance, Cornelius Fudge, Dolores Umbridge, and Lucius Malfoy." Serpent Council? Sounds like a bad Slytherin alumni club. but I haven't heard of it anywhere. A butterfly effect I created, maybe, but I am not worried. At this point, nobody can kill me now. I tilted my head. I frowned. That's quite the collection of moral fiber. His lips twitched. I fear this is less a meeting and more, an inspection. They claim to be investigating magical irregularities in the region. I knew exactly what those were. My teleportation trials, I said softly. Dumbledore nodded once. Yes. The anomalies registered as high-tier spatial distortions. Most would not understand their source, but the Council rarely overlooks such events. Where were they when Voldemort was raising armies? I asked. Bit late for moral panic. Power rarely moves unless it feels threatened, Dumbledore said, eyes glinting. Be careful, Harry. They will not come here as friends. Of course they will not. Later that night, I found Dobby in the kitchens. He'd been avoiding me all term, but when he saw me, his ears drooped. Harry Potter, sir, terrible things is being planned. Dobby is hearing Master Lucius shouting, he says he will make someone pay. Prove. I asked carefully. He didn't say what. Dobby shook his head. Only that Hogwarts will be cleansed. Oh, I see. So Daddy dearest doesn't know the diary failed. Oh, this will be entertaining. Dobby, I said quietly, if anything happens, you come straight to me. Understand? You don't run, you don't hide. Dobby's eyes were huge. Harry Potter is too kind. Dobby will watch. Dobby will listen. And I already knew what I was going to do. The following Monday, storm clouds rolled over the castle. The Great Hall was unnervingly quiet when the main doors opened and the guests entered. Cornelius Fudge, looking like a toad in a bowler hat. Dolores Umbridge, pink and poisonous, smile like curdled milk. Lucius Malfoy, pale and immaculate, walking with the confidence of a man who thought he owned the air itself. And behind them, 3 cloaked figures bearing the crest of the Serpent Council. The room felt colder just from their presence. Headmaster Dumbledore, one of them said, voice smooth as silk. We appreciate your cooperation. We're here to ensure the safety of this establishment and to investigate the recent irregularities. Dumbledore smiled pleasantly. Hogwarts welcomes inquiry. Though I should hope the Council remembers curiosity, like magic, is best used with restraint. Fudge chuckled nervously. Lucius didn't. I kept my head down, pretending to study my toast. But I could feel Lucius' gaze sweep the students, searching. Calculating. He was hunting for a ghost and I had no intention of being caught. Harry's POV. Hogwarts had this strange way of pretending everything was normal, even when it wasn't. The Serpent Council was stalking the halls, in sleek grey cloaks, with their silver serpent pins gleaming, and somehow breakfast still smelled like toast and pumpkin juice. Maybe that was the magic of Hogwarts. Or maybe everyone here had just survived enough insanity to develop selective denial. I'd been careful since they arrived. No teleportation trials. No new spell work that bent reality too loudly. Just quiet observation, and countermeasures. You don't leave yourself open when the Ministry sends its snakes into your den. Transfiguration revisions that week was about morphological continuity, which was McGonagall's fancy way of saying, don't make your porcupine a pincushion that still squeaks. Ron turned his into something that looked like a small, furry landmine. Brilliant, I told him. Now it can explode and hold pins. He flipped his wand at me. You're enjoying this too much. Absolutely. Meanwhile, Hermione's pincushion actually fluttered its little quills like it was proud of itself. McGonagall gave her that rare approving smile that could make an entire class feel inferior by comparison. Everything looked normal. Students laughing, parchment rustling. Malfoy whispering snide comments about council protection against unstable students. But I could feel it, the subtle ripple in the castle's wards. The council wasn't just investigating. They were scanning. And they weren't scanning for ghosts. That night, it was just the three of us, Ron, Hermione, and me in the room of requirement. The walls had shaped themselves into a broad training space with sand flooring, soft blue light, and shelves of spare wands. We'd been using this place for weeks now, part spell practice, part endurance training, part therapy session disguised as dueling. Ron was sprawled on the floor, groaning. "Tell me again why we do this instead of sleeping." "Because," I said, flicking my wand, "magic's like a muscle. You don't train it, you lose it." Hermione shot me a glare between wand swings. "You sound like a very smug fitness instructor." I grinned. "Maybe because I am." She rolled her eyes but didn't stop practicing the wandless repulsion charm I'd taught her. The air shimmered faintly around her hands. Her control was improving fast, so was Ron's. They'd both started picking up the mental focus needed for wandless casting. Still, tonight wasn't just practice. "All right," I said finally, leaning against the wall. "We're taking a break." Ron groaned in relief and collapsed onto a cushion. Hermione just narrowed her eyes. "You're about to say something worrying, aren't you?" "Probably." I tossed an apple between my hands. "Those spatial fluctuations the council's chasing? They're mine." The silence that followed could have frozen a Cornish pixie mid-flight. Hermione blinked. "Yours." Ron sat up, crumbs in his hair. You're the one who's got the ministry's knickers in a twist." "Guilty." I shrugged. "But before I tell you what I've actually been working on, you two need to strengthen your occlumency." Ron groaned. "Again?" "Yes, again," I said. "Until you can block my legilimency without sweating like you've run a marathon." Hermione frowned. "You're being paranoid." "I'm being practical." She hated when I was right. I could see the curiosity burning behind her eyes. She wanted to ask what I'd made, how it worked, why I was hiding it. But I'd promised myself I wouldn't tell them until they were ready. Not because I didn't trust them, because I don't trust others. The next evening, the Gryffindor common room was warm and loud. Seamus was teaching Dean a new exploding card trick. It worked too well. Parvati and Lavender were giggling over which weekly. And Ron was arguing with me over whether chess counted as exercise. "It's mental exercise," he insisted. "Your knight's been in the same spot for 10 minutes, I said. "Strategy," he said smugly. "Laziness." Hermione sighed from her armchair. "I'm surrounded by idiots." "Accurate," I said. She threw a cushion at me. I ducked, laughing. It was these moments, stupid, pointless, peaceful, that made the rest of it bearable. Because outside the common room walls, the air around Hogwarts was tightening like a drawn bowstring. A week later on Sunday, Dumbledore's summons came again. When I entered his office, he was seated by the window, moonlight catching the faint smile beneath his beard. "Your progress is remarkable," he said. "Your control of transfiguration during duels has improved, as has your patience." "Thanks," I said. "Still working on the patience part." We spent the next hour transfiguring conjured weapons mid-flight, turning daggers into dust, arrows into flowers, hexes into harmless sparks. It wasn't flashy, but it was elegant, clean magic, as Dumbledore called it. As the session ended, he turned serious. "The council's scope is widening," he said quietly. "They've requested permission to inspect the lower vaults." I declined, of course. "Do they think Hogwarts is hiding a criminal?" I asked. "I think they're looking for an answer that frightens them," he said softly. "And they're hoping to find it in you." I smiled faintly. "Then they're looking in the wrong place." He didn't disagree. By midweek, the Council had started interviewing students. Polite questions at first: "Have you noticed any unusual magical activity?" But the undertone was sharp. Lucius Malfoy was often seen near them, whispering, advising, pretending he wasn't orchestrating the whole thing. Fudge looked increasingly nervous, Umbridge increasingly delighted. The castle had become a chessboard and they hadn't realized yet that I was playing too. Behind the scenes, I'd already reinforced the castle's inner wards. Every council scanning charm now looped harmlessly back to their own devices. They'd find nothing but static. And at night, when the corridors fell silent, I began crafting something else, a small, intricate rune series along the northern wing of the castle. A containment field. In case the council decided to escalate. I wasn't paranoid. Just prepared. I.am.back. Ready for not uploading, I was reviewing the chapter and found a pulled hole. Yeah, that was the cause of the delay, had to rewrite the whole chapter multiple times and even changed the arc. If you found the arc boring, that's on me. 911p2. Chapter 36, ch 36. That's it. That evening, I slipped down to the dungeons, for work obviously. Dobby met me there, darting nervously from shadow to shadow. His eyes were wide and hopeful in the torchlight. Harry Potter, sir, is sure this will work? Positive, I said, kneeling to check the runes etched along the floor to block scans of council. Faint blue lines that shimmered under my hand. It's not a spell that frees you. It's one that severs the magical tether linking you to the Malfoys. Quietly. Permanently. Dobby's hands shook. But the bond, it is old magic, sir. House elf magic is deep. I know. That's why I'd been studying alchemy and rune-based transmutation under Dumbledore all term. That's why I'd burned through half the restricted section looking for solutions. This wasn't about rebellion. It was about justice and timing. The Ministry was already watching Dumbledore. If the Malfoys suddenly lost their elf, it would look like Hogwarts was interfering in pure-blood family matters. Exactly the sort of thing Fudge could use to corner the headmaster. Which meant the spell had to be perfect, silent, untraceable, and impossible to connect to me. Back in the room, Ron and Hermione had started noticing how tired I looked. "You're up to something," Hermione said finally, setting her book down. "Always," I said, half smiling. "You could at least tell us what it is this time." "When you can block my mind reading," I said, "I'll tell you everything." She huffed, but kept at her occlumency drills. Ron was improving faster, mostly because he hated losing to her. As they practiced, I wove a few simple illusions into the room's walls, faint layers of shielding charm, one over another. Nothing fancy, just enough to block any magical eavesdropping from outside. Because if the council did decide to scan the castle deeper, this room would be their blind spot. It was my safe zone. Our safe zone. And maybe, if things went right, the key to freeing Dobby unnoticed. By the end of the week, the council's reports were clear. No signs of forbidden or experimental magic within Hogwarts walls. All readings inconclusive. They were baffled. Dumbledore was amused. But behind the calm, something else was stirring, the first whisper of discontent from within the council itself. Someone among them was starting to doubt the official story. Someone sharp enough to realize that not finding anything can sometimes be the loudest alarm of all. And as I watched from the shadows of the library balcony that night, Dobby waiting in the dark below with the last rune stone in his hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that our game was only beginning. Harry's POV. For all the council's noise, Hogwarts didn't really change much. Classes went on. Peeves still terrorized first years. The twins tried to sell anti-council stink pellets to anyone brave enough to prank an investigator. Life, somehow, found a rhythm again. Only the grown-ups looked worried, Dumbledore, McGonagall, even Snape, though he hid it better than most. You could feel the tension in the way they watched the grey-cloaked inspectors pass by, whispering Latin like it was perfume. But for me, it was a kind of background static. I had bigger projects. It was the night of the equinox, perfect symmetry for what I was about to do. The room of requirement had reshaped itself into a dimly glowing chamber, runes crawling like veins along the walls. Dobby stood in the center, trembling slightly, his ears drooping. "Harry Potter, sir. Dobby is ready." I nodded, placing the runestones in a circle around him. Rituals was a slow art. You couldn't rush it, couldn't bully it. You had to listen. So I did. Every flicker of his magic, every ripple of his binding, I traced and rewove. It wasn't elegant. The Malfoy's bond was a snarl of old blood magic, twisted through centuries, but I'd studied worse. Dumbledore's alchemy sessions had given me the foundation, law of equivalent exchange. The rest was me. Yes, I fed my magic to free Dobby. The ritual required personal magic, not ambient, that's why I cannot link ley lines to the ritual. Good news is, I am an infinite magic battery. 10 minutes later, the bond snapped. Softly. Cleanly. Like a breath leaving a body. Dobby froze, eyes wide, like he couldn't believe the weight that had left him. Then he started sobbing. "Free, sir, truly free," he whispered. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Welcome to unemployment. Don't spend it all in one place." He laughed through his tears. And in that moment, with the runes dimming around us, I realized I'd done something the Ministry would call illegal rituals of sentient magical life. But it wasn't. It was right. That night, I made sure Dobby was hidden, under a glamour charm, working among the Hogwarts kitchens. Officially, he was a transfer from elf reserves. Malfoy must know by now that his slave is gone. Not that he cared for Dobby anyway. He'd slipped his collar, slipped his name, and for the first time, wasn't in the control of the Malfoys. I'd call that a win. But the council wasn't done. They wanted to end the investigation formally, and for that, they needed one last inspection of the wards. Which meant they came close, too close. I could feel their scrying spells brushing against my counter charms like circus fingers. Every time they probed, I reshaped the magic on instinct, bending the flow, creating echo signatures, sending them in circles. I was careful. Perfect. But perfection has a sound, a silence too smooth to be natural. The Great Hall felt like a courtroom by the end of the day, and Lucius Malfoy looked like a man whose entire empire had just cracked down the middle. I watched from my seat among the students as the Serpent Council investigators stood before the Ministry panel, folders thick with reports and rune readings. Their leader, a silver-haired witch with the kind of voice that could cut marble, cleared her throat. After extensive analysis of Hogwarts wards, faculty spell records, and ambient magical readings, the Council has found no evidence of deliberate tampering, dark experimentation, or illegal magical constructs within the castle grounds. Her words echoed like hammer blows. A few students actually clapped. Lucius froze. His jaw twitched, but the polished smirk didn't quite return. "However," she continued, "we did find unusual spatial fluctuations, old ones, likely residual from the castle's age and magical evolution. Hogwarts, as you know, predates modern stabilizing protocols by several centuries. Translation: it's a miracle this place hasn't exploded already." Ron leaned toward me. "So basically, the castle farts magic sometimes." I snorted. "Elegant summary, mate." At the high table, Dumbledore folded his hands and smiled with the serenity of a man who already knew the ending. Lucius, however, looked like he'd just bitten through a lemon laced with arsenic. "Surely," he said tightly, "you must agree that certain anomalies deserve further oversight." The council head turned, voice icy. "Lord Malfoy, you personally petitioned this investigation under claims of a contained dark artifact influencing Hogwarts wards." Her tone sharpened with every word. "We found no such object. No trace of any residual curse. And no evidence of Headmaster Dumbledore's negligence. The council does not appreciate being summoned under false pretenses. A ripple of murmurs swept the hall. Even Umbridge looked caught off guard. Lucius' knuckles whitened on his cane. I assure you. Enough, she said simply. This matter is closed. She turned on her heel, cloak sweeping behind her, the other council members following. The sigil on her shoulder, the silver serpent coiled around an hourglass, glimmered once, then vanished as they stepped through the flue. Gone. Just like that. And Lucius Malfoy was left standing in front of the entire Great Hall silent, pale, his plan disintegrating like parchment in flame. Dumbledore rose. His voice, calm and kind as ever, carried across the hall. Thank you, Lord Malfoy, for your concern. But as you see, Hogwarts remains quite capable of managing itself. Polite applause. Laughter, too. Soft, sharp, everywhere. Lucius' gaze swept the students, and when his eyes met mine, just for a heartbeat, I saw it. The mask cracked. Not hatred. Something colder. Recognition. He didn't know what I'd done, but he knew I'd done something. And for a Malfoy, humiliation demands repayment. He turned on his heel and stalked out, robes flaring like fury given form. Umbridge and Fudge scurried after him, whispering, gesturing, damage control in motion. Dumbledore just sighed, adjusting his half-moon spectacles. Mr. Potter, he murmured quietly as I passed him on the way out, I trust you'll keep a low profile for at least 1 week. I smiled. Can't make promises I can't keep, sir. Hogwarts had a strange rhythm after chaos, like the castle itself exhaled and pretended nothing had happened. The Serpent Council packed up 2 days ago, all pomp and paranoia, after finding exactly nothing. Dumbledore, of course, was gracious as ever. Lucius Malfoy, not so much. Word spread like fire, that the council had scolded him in front of everyone for wasting ministry time. Fred and George even made a badge that flashed proud survivor of Malfoy's meltdown. They were selling fast. I might have bought one. For science. Trust. Breakfast that morning was suspiciously calm. Ron was halfway through a mountain of bacon, Hermione buried in her transfiguration notes. So, Ron said through a mouthful, Lucius Malfoy Ministry Embarrassment of the Month. Of the year, I said. Probably put a curse on his own reflection afterward. Hermione tried to hide her laugh behind a sip of pumpkin juice. You two never stop. Accurate, I replied. Truthfully, I was, lighter. Like a knot inside me had finally loosened. Dobby was free, really free, and bound to me only by his own will. I was worried, how will I get the chance to free him? Chamber isn't revealed like canon. Turns out it wasn't that strong bond. If Dobby wasn't willing or their bond was close, ritual wouldn't work. But the ritual had worked perfectly, it had felt right, like restoring something that should have never been broken. No one else knew. And that was how it had to stay. A week later, I was back in Dumbledore's office, sitting opposite him as Fawkes preened quietly in the corner. I must say, Dumbledore began, your progress is unnerving. Thanks. He smiled that unreadable smile. You've mastered runic reinforcement, completed arithmetic optimization, and if I'm not mistaken, improved upon my own alchemical filter equations. Only a little, I said, trying not to sound smug. Your equations leaked mana during high compression. I patched them. He chuckled softly. And I suppose you discovered that by accident? Sort of. I blew up a teapot. Ah, the mark of all great discoveries. We spent the rest of the lesson on soul symmetry theory, how magic flowed differently through intent, emotion, and form. Dumbledore's tone shifted halfway through, not lecture-like, more personal. He didn't say anything. But there was something in his gaze, worry, pride, maybe both. Evenings were for room of requirement, though at this point it might as well have been room of regular grind. Ron and Hermione had grown strong. Not just physically. Magically too. Repetition, resistance, rhythm. This was their motto by now. Hermione's wandless control was terrifying now. She could maintain 3 levitating objects while lecturing Ron on rune logic. Ron, for his part, was getting scary good at defensive casting. His shields came fast, instinctive, solid as stone. I didn't tell them how proud I was. But I think they knew. Hermione sometimes stared at me when she thought I wasn't looking, not fear or awe, just curiosity. Like she was trying to solve me. Ron just grinned and said, "You're still a git, mate," which I took as affection. They knew about the teleportation spell now. Not the details, only that it existed. I told them after the council's team left, and they promised not to ask more until their occlumency shields could resist me. Fair deal. I could feel them getting closer to my level. Classes went back to normal, or as normal as Hogwarts got. Lockhart was still incompetent, Snape was still moody, and Binns was still somehow both undead and boring. Fred and George launched a new prototype called Portable Swamp Beta Edition. Filch was still screaming about it 3 days later. And in between all that, I actually laughed. It felt good. Harry's POV. By May, the castle smelled like exams and anxiety. Hermione had turned into a walking textbook. Ron was bargaining with higher powers for passing grades. And I decided to start a band. It wasn't a grand revelation or anything. We were sitting in defense against the dark arts. Lockhart had once again forgotten to teach anything remotely useful and was now posing for a self-portrait, when I looked around the room and said, "You know what we need? A distraction." Ron blinked. "From what?" "From him, and some stress relief before exams," I said, nodding toward Lockhart, who was asking if his painted self should have shinier teeth. That was all it took. Ron grinned. "How, making a group, like a Quidditch team?" "No," I said. "Something less painful." "Music." Hermione looked up from her notes. "Harry, you can't just decide to start a band." "I just did." "Yep, a band, nice idea, right, or not? Let's see how the next chitter will be received." CA 911p2. Chapter 37, ch 37. Something to remember. Harry's POV *. It started as a joke. A study break. A way to test magical acoustics, as Hermione diplomatically put it. Still don't know what acoustics means. But by the time June rolled around, it had become something more, a band. I never planned to start one. I just needed an outlet that wasn't runes or dueling drills or countermeasures against ministry spies. Something human. And so, somehow, Hogwarts' first official student magical band was born. Me, Ron, Hermione, Luna, Neville, Daphne, and Tracy. Our instruments half muggle, half enchanted, and entirely experimental. Third-person OV *. By evening, the Great Hall didn't look like itself. The long tables were gone, replaced by chairs pushed to the sides and floating lanterns that shimmered in rhythm with faint notes of tuning spells. A stage had been conjured near the front, polished oak, threaded with silver runes for sound clarity. The enchanted ceiling reflected a dusk sky brushed with streaks of gold and violet. This wouldn't happen if Harry wasn't McGonagall's favorite. Harry adjusted his collar, heart doing that uneven flutter it always did before something big. Except this wasn't a duel, or a ritual, or another secret he had to guard. This was different. For once, he didn't need to hide anything. Just play. Ron tapped a drumstick on his knee, muttering, "If I mess up, I'm blaming you, mate." "You'll be fine," Harry said, grinning. "Just pretend it's a bludger you're hitting." Hermione rolled her eyes, wand flicking to check the tuning spells on her enchanted keyboard. "Honestly, boys. We're playing for the whole school, not running from Death Eaters. Neville plucked his bass cello, the deep hum blending softly with Luna's harp. At least if something explodes, people will assume it's part of the show. Luna, dreamy as ever, tilted her head. Magic likes music. It listens, if you let it. That quieted them. Because she was right. The air did feel charged, as if Hogwarts itself was curious what its students were about to do. Daphne and Tracy adjusted their strings beside Hermione, whispering about harmonics. The stage lights shifted, gold dust twinkling like stars. McGonagall's voice rose from the audience, "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Potter." Harry stepped forward. The room hushed. 100 eyes watched expectant, curious, enchanted. He took a slow breath. "We thought Hogwarts could use a theme," he said, voice calm but carrying. "Something that feels like home." He nodded toward Hermione, who tapped her wand on the keys. And the first haunting notes of Hedwig's theme filled the hall. More like Hogwarts' theme now. A/N, any song mentioned is owned by their respective singers. I don't own anything. Though do lug your earbuds and listen all the songs while reading this. Hedwig's theme by John Williams. It was slow at first, soft as memory, the kind of sound that reminded you of corridors at dusk, owls crossing the night sky, first years whispering under candlelight. Then the tempo grew, Ron's drums joining like a heartbeat, the strings weaving in until the great hall breathed with it. Magic pulsed along the walls, lanterns spinning, the enchanted ceiling reflecting bursts of light like falling stars. Like Hogwarts itself seems to enjoy it. Maybe it did. The final note hung in the air, shimmering, suspended, fragile. Then silence. Not empty silence, the kind that hums with awe. The enchanted lanterns flickered as though they too were catching their breath. Even the ceiling sky, a swirl of twilight and starlight, seemed to pause, reflecting the spellbound faces below. Then came a sound, a soft gasp from one of the first years near the front, followed by another and another. And suddenly, the silence broke. Applause crashed through the great hall like a wave. It wasn't polite or restrained, it was alive. Students stood up from their seats, whistling, cheering, stamping their feet on the floor. Some clapped out of rhythm, others yelled over the noise, trying to be heard. "Did you see that? Bloody brilliant! I didn't know you could do that with a harp." Fred and George were leading the chaos, of course, whistling loud enough to echo off the rafters. "That's our boy, Harry!" Fred yelled. "Give him a record deal!" George added. Nearby, Ginny looked dazed, smiling softly and said, "That sounded like home." Even the Slytherin table, usually reserved, calculating, had softened expressions. Daphne's friends clapped in slow, reluctant admiration until Theo elbowed one of them into doing it properly. From the Ravenclaws came the loudest applause, several enchanted their hands to sparkle with blue light as they clapped, forming a flickering constellation above their heads. The Hufflepuffs joined in with rhythm, turning the applause into a near-musical beat. And the professors. McGonagall stood at the edge of the stage, her usual strict expression cracked by something softer. There was pride in her eyes, and perhaps just a hint of nostalgia. She was the first to start clapping formally, which only made the crowd erupt even more. Flitwick was practically bouncing on his toes, squeaking, "Marvelous! Simply marvelous! The harmonic layering, oh, the precision of those charm chords!" Sprout wiped her eyes behind her glasses. "Oh, my, it really does sound like Hogwarts, doesn't it?" Snape, sitting at the end of the staff table, didn't clap. But he didn't sneer, either. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable, eyes faintly narrowed in concentration. If one looked closely, though, they might have noticed the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not quite approval, but something close. Hagrid, of course, was bawling. "Thas our Harry! Playin' like a proper wizard, he is. And Dumbledore sitting quietly in the center looked the most moved of all. He didn't clap at first. He just watched, eyes shining faintly behind his spectacles, the light of the candles reflected like stars. Then, slowly, he stood. The crowd hushed as his hands came together. Clap! 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 Each sound sharp and deliberate, filled with that calm gravitas only Dumbledore carried. And with that, the applause swelled again, thunderous and whole. Harry stood frozen for a moment on stage, unsure what to do, cheeks faintly flushed, breath caught somewhere between pride and disbelief. Hermione was smiling wide beside him, Ron thumping the drumsticks against his knee, Luna humming softly to herself as though still lost in the echo. For the first time in a long while, Hogwarts didn't feel like a castle full of secrets. It felt like a home filled with sound. Harry barely heard it through the rush in his chest. He smiled, glanced back at his friends, Ron grinning wide, Hermione beaming, Luna half lost in thought, Daphne's eyes bright, Tracy's hair glowing under the light. But the night has only started. He raised a hand for quiet. Next, he said, voice a touch lower, is a personal one. Ron leaned forward, muttering, "Here it comes." Harry's grin turned crooked. "It's about fighting back, about not giving up. I think, it's sort of about me." A few students laughed. Someone yelled, "Of course it is." I pointed my wand, blue flame rippled across the stage. "Fair warning," I said, "this one's loud." Ron cracked his drumsticks together. The first bass drop hit. "Believer" by Imagine Dragons. I took a deep breath and sang. "First things first, I'ma say all the words inside my head. I'ma say all the words inside my head. I'm fired up and tired of the way that things have been, oh. The way that things have been, oh." The crowd roared. Magic thrummed through me, literal lightning trailing my fingertips as I moved. Runes I'd carved into the stage flared with rhythm, each word pulsed with energy. When the chorus hit, fire burst skyward. Pain. You made me a believer. Pain. You break me down and build me up, believer, believer. Pain. Oh, let the bullets fly, oh, let them rain. My life, my love, my drive, it came from pain. You made me a believer, believer. Hermione kept time with charm sparks, Ron was grinning like a maniac, even Luna was head-banging softly, eyes closed in rhythm. By the bridge, half the school was on their feet, singing in sync. It wasn't just music, it was release. All the tension, all the whispers, all the secrets turned into one roar of sound and light. The last echo of Believer hung in the great hall like thunder fading into the rafters. Smoke and spell light shimmered above the stage, gold, crimson, and silver threads swirling together before dissolving into motes of drifting magic. Harry stood in the center, wand guitar tilted down, breath heavy. He didn't move. Neither did anyone else. For a heartbeat, Hogwarts was silent. Then, the room erupted. Cheers hit like a wave. It wasn't the polite applause they'd given after the Hogwarts theme, this was raw, electric, alive. The whole school was on its feet. Gryffindor banners flared to life, the enchanted ceiling flashed like a storm caught in sunlight, and even the ghosts above were glowing brighter. Ron was still drumming the table, whooping over the roar. "That's my best mate, that's my best mate." Hermione was grinning so wide it almost looked painful, her curls frizzed from the residual static in the air. "You're insane," she laughed breathlessly. "Brilliant, but insane." Neville, who had barely looked up during rehearsal, was standing tall beside his cello, smiling quietly like someone who'd just seen a sunrise. Luna clapped gently slow, dreamlike, her eyes bright and watery. "It sounded like, you turned pain into light," she said softly. Daphne Greengrass was leaning forward, whispering something to Tracy, both looking oddly impressed. Even the Slytherin table, normally reserved, arms crossed, expressions cool, had cracked. Blaise Zabani gave a slow, deliberate clap, the kind that said, I respect this, but I'll never admit it outright. Did he just sing about himself? Pansy whispered. Draco, still staring at the stage, muttered, obviously. And somehow made it sound like prophecy. The Ravenclaws were already analyzing it. Padma was muttering, he modulated emotion with magic. That's not music, that's mind resonance. Terry Boot shook his head. That was artillery with rhythm. Hufflepuffs, meanwhile, were too busy losing their minds. Woohoo! Ernie yelled, nearly knocking over a pitcher of pumpkin juice. Hannah and Susan were glowing, cheering Harry's name until their voices cracked. And then the professors. Professor Flitwick was practically vibrating. Did you see the harmonic layering? A fourth-tier amplification weave, and no distortion. Extraordinary. Professor Sprout was smiling in that calm, proud way of hers. He's grown, Albus. Not just stronger but also kind. McGonagall adjusted her spectacles, expression halfway between stern and utterly moved. I believe, she murmured, that's the first time I've seen the Great Hall stand for a student since the war. Snape sat with his arms folded, eyes on Harry. He didn't clap but he didn't sneer either. When Hermione passed him a look, he just said, it was tolerable. Then, quieter, he's found his rhythm. And finally, Dumbledore rose. He didn't speak at first. Just stood there, eyes glimmering in the candlelight, the old, bright blue of his gaze reflecting 1,000 sparks from the enchanted ceiling. When he did speak, his voice carried warmth, pride, and a faint melancholy. First, you gave us Hogwarts' heart, he said softly. Now you've shown us its fire. He turned slightly, eyes meeting Harry's. To believe truly is to remember who we are, even when the world forgets. Well done, my boy. The students quieted, almost instinctively. Harry smiled faintly, rubbing the back of his neck. Guess I got carried away. Ron snorted. Carried away? Mate, you nearly set the hall on fire. Emotionally, Luna added dreamily. Hermione rolled her eyes, still grinning. Don't encourage him. Dumbledore chuckled softly. Encouragement, Miss Granger, is sometimes the wisest kind of mischief. The laughter rippled again, warm and easy. For the first time in months, there was no tension of exams, no storm of politics or fear hanging over them. Just light, music, and magic. Harry looked around the hall, the glowing faces, the banners, the gentle hum of Hogwarts itself resonating in the stone. He leaned into the mic again, voice low, almost teasing. So, he said, since you lot aren't tired yet. A roar of "No!" answered him before he could finish. He grinned, sparks flickering around his wand tip. All right then, he said, eyes shining. Let's make some noise. The lights dimmed, the instruments shimmered back into readiness, and as the crowd leaned in, Harry whispered. This next one is called Begin. Harry's POV**. Begin by Mainskin. Put your loving hand out, baby. 'Cause I'm beggin'. If Believer was thunder, then Begin was lightning. The first beat dropped and the hall moved with it. Ron hit the drums like he'd been born behind them, Hermione's fingers glided across glowing keys, and Luna's harp shimmered beside her like threads of starlight. Neville's bass pulsed through the floor, steady, grounded, the heartbeat beneath the noise, while Daphne and Tracy filled the air with soft, silvery strings that wrapped around everything. And I just let go. No more holding back. No politics. No serpent council breathing down my neck. No secrets humming under my skin. Just music. I'm beggin' you. So put your loving hand out, baby. I'm beggin' you. So put your loving hand out, darling. Ridin' high when I was king. I played it hard and fast, 'cause I had everything. I walked away, but you warned me then. But easy come and easy go, and it would end. My voice echoed through the hall, not amplified, just amplified by belief. Every word came from somewhere old, somewhere raw. Every note carried every sleepless night, every scar, every laugh that kept me from breaking. The crowd started clapping along, hundreds of hands keeping rhythm. The floating candles swayed like they were dancing too, and the ceiling reflected stormlight, lightning flickering in time with the beat. So anytime I bleed, you let me go. Yet, anytime I feed you, get me? No? Anytime I seek you, let me know. But I plan and see, just let me go. I'm on my knees when I'm beggin'. 'Cause I don't want to lose you. Hey yet, ra ta ta ta. When the chorus hit, I felt the hall's magic surge back. Hogwarts itself was humming, as if the castle wanted to sing with us. Even the professors couldn't help it. Flitwick was standing on his chair clapping in tempo, Sprout's plants on the windowsill had started blooming mid-song. And even Snape's robes fluttered from the sonic vibration. And Dumbledore, he wasn't watching me anymore. He was watching the students, thousands of them shining like candlelight, laughing, shouting, alive. I caught his eye once. He just nodded, that small, knowing nod of someone who'd seen too much war and finally got to see peace for a minute. When the last note faded, I let the silence stretch. No one moved. No one even breathed. And then, the applause broke like a wave. It wasn't wild this time. It was full. Like everyone knew they'd just been part of something bigger than a song. Chapter 38, ch 38 Exams and Fun. The castle had been oddly calm after the concert. Even Filch hadn't yelled in 3 days, which Hermione said was either a miracle or a sign of impending apocalypse. June had arrived. Which meant exams. Which meant panic, parchment, and professors with that smile, the kind that promised suffering disguised as education. Professor McGonagall's classroom smelled faintly of chalk, parchment, and quiet judgment. Remember, as I am repeating for the since the term began, she said, pacing between rows of desks, transfiguration is not a matter of strength, but precision. Sloppiness leads to explosions, or worse, AT in your report card. Ron muttered, honestly, that sounds like my future. Hermione kicked his ankle under the desk without looking up from her notes. Very funny, now focus, Ronald. Harry tried not to laugh, mostly because McGonagall's animagus senses could probably detect amusement. For theory, quills scratched furiously. Harry flew through the formulas, beetle-to-button conversions, the perfect curvature ratio for avifers, and the subtle math behind long list of Gramps laws. Hermione was a blur beside him, writing as if she'd studied in another dimension. When practicals came, McGonagall folded her hands. Begin. Harry's softening charm worked perfectly as the brick on his table melted into a safe, rubbery lump. Ron softened too, maybe perhaps too well. It started wobbling like jelly and tried to roll off the table. Controlled, Mr. Weasley, McGonagall warned. Controlled, Ron repeated, chasing the brick with both hands. Right, it's controlled chaos. Harry stifled a snort. Hermione's porcupine turned into a perfect pincushion, straight out of a textbook. Outstanding work, Miss Granger, McGonagall said warmly. Harry's followed as equally perfect, maybe a bit shinier than usual. McGonagall gave him a small smile, the rare one. Outstanding as well, Mr. Potter. You had your father's talent in transfiguration, though I expect you two to stop trying to outdo each other before term's end. Ron grumbled, never gonna happen. Looking at Hermione fiery eyes. Maybe he is not wrong. Greenhouse 3 was boiling. The summer sun glared off the glass walls, and the smell of soil and mandrake fertilizer filled the air. Professor Sprout clapped her hands. All right, dears. Time to show me what you've learned. Mandrake's first though careful handling. I don't want another fainting incident. Ron muttered, still my greatest achievement, and Harry elbowed him before Hermione's glare could. Harry adjusted his earmuffs and gently pulled the mandrake from its pot, and it squealed, of course, but only for a moment before he safely tucked it into the new soil. Smooth. Controlled. Hermione mirrored him flawlessly. Ron's mandrake, on the other hand, looked genuinely offended while crying. When he stopped, it bit him. Ow! Professor, mine's possessed. Sprout took off her earmuffs and chuckled. No, Mr. Weasley, just spirited. Like you. Harry leaned in, voice low. Ron, she just called your mandrake sassy. Brilliant, Ron muttered. My plant's got more attitude than me. Harry chuckled. The dungeons were dim and smelled like roasted flobberworms and mild despair. Snape glided between cauldrons like a dark bat, his voice low and slow. For your final practical, he said, you will brew a strengthening solution and without assistance. If it turns the correct shade of cerulean, you may leave with your dignity intact. Ron whispered, what shade is cerulean again? Hermione whispered back, the color of the sky before you fail. Harry nearly laughed, but the risk of getting detention was too real. He focused on measuring flobberworm mucus precisely, stirring thrice clockwise, twice counter. His cheat instinct carried him the way. Steam rose blue and perfect. Across the table, Ron's potion was, more of a brownish turquoise, bubbling aggressively. Harry, he said nervously, is it supposed to sound like that? Not unless it's developing sentience. Hermione's potion gleamed exactly like the textbook photo. Snape stopped behind her, his expression unreadable. Consistently tedious perfection, Miss Granger. Then to Harry, acceptable. Barely. Harry blinked. Brew, it was perfect. But that was Snape's way of saying outstanding, but I refuse to feed your ego. Ron's cauldron hissed. Snape turned sharply. Mr. Weasley, what color is that? Ron froze. Unique. Ron is not gonna leave with his dignity intact. The classroom was transformed with desks vanished, replaced by glowing dueling lines across the stone floor. A dozen banners floated above the tables, each glittering with his face and the words. Defense through Dazzle Gilderoy Lockhart's golden rules of heroism. I leaned toward Ron. Defense through what? Ron squinted. Pretty sure Dazzle's not a spell, mate. Hermione sighed. It's metaphorical. Yeah, I muttered. So is his talent. At the front of the room, Lockhart stood in powder blue robes that practically screamed for attention. His teeth shone brighter than the chandeliers. Good morning, my intrepid defenders, he boomed. Today's final exam will be a test of courage, creativity, and composure. Oh, and of course the admiration for your humble professor. Dean whispered, is that graded separately? Lockhart clapped his hands, and the curtains behind him swept open, revealing several enchanted cages. Inside were Cornish pixies, a stuffed vampire dummy wearing a cape, and something that looked suspiciously like an easel in a wig. Hermione groaned quietly. Oh, honestly. Lockhart waved his wand with theatrical flourish. Each of you will demonstrate at least 2 spells we have covered this year. Disarming, defensive, dazzling, it's your choice. I, naturally, will evaluate your posture, pronunciation, and panache. Ron whispered, what about performance anxiety? 5 points from Gryffindor if I hear any grumbling. Lockhart announced cheerfully. Hermione went first, of course she did. She stepped up, wand steady, calm as a dueling master. Expelliarmus, she called, and the wand flew from the vampire dummy's hand. Then she followed up with a perfect Fumos duo to obscure her movement before reappearing and hitting the pixie cage with a controlled tickling charm. The pixies collapsed in hysterical laughter. Lockhart clapped. Marvelous form. Almost as graceful as when I subdued the werewolf of Wagga Wagga Hey have I told you about. Only 7 times this term, I muttered. Hermione gave me a look that said behave. Ron's spell work was enthusiastic. His Expelliarmus worked beautifully but also sent the dummy's arm flying clear across the room. Sorry, he called. Lockhart laughed nervously. Ah, yes. Overzealous passion and quite reminiscent of my own school days. I too was known for, powerful wand work. Ron grinned. Must have hit your head with it once too often. Lockhart blinked. Pardon. Nothing, sir. Finally, my turn. I stepped forward, wand loose in hand, feeling everyone's eyes on me. Lockhart straightened his shoulders. Now, Mr. Potter, I expect you to give us a true show. Fame must be maintained, after all. I smiled thinly. Wouldn't want to outshine you, Professor. Hermione groaned softly. I raised my wand. Expelliarmus, and the vampire dummy's wand shot up. Without missing a beat, I followed with Fumos Tria. Thick smoke filled the air, then a sharp vertimillious duo, sending bright green sparks cutting through the haze. The crowd gasped. The lights faded, the air cleared. The dummy stood frozen mid-spell, smoke curling from its sleeve. Lockhart blinked, dazzled. Ah yes. Excellent flair. Quite reminiscent of well me. Ron muttered, sure, if you were competent. When everyone finished, Lockhart began pacing dramatically in front of the class, cloak swirling. You have all been adequate, he declared. Hermione's face twitched. Some even above average. Though of course, true greatness cannot be taught, it must be lived. And I, your humble guide, have lived it generously for your benefit. I leaned toward Ron. Did he just give himself an outstanding? Ron nodded. And probably extra credit. Lockhart waved his wand, scattering glitter over the room. I hereby declare this year's defense class a triumph. Thanks entirely to your radiant and remarkably photogenic professor. Dean sneezed. What even is this glitter made of? Hermione sighed, muttering, delusion. By the time we left, our robes sparkled like disco balls. Ron looked down at himself and said, if this doesn't wash out, I'm hexing him next term. I grinned. Call it defense against the dark arts, practical experience. The theory was brutal: memory charms, freezing charms, slowing charms, and the proper counter-sequence for engorgement spells. Hermione finished first, naturally. Harry followed, just behind. Ron wrote something about magic going brrr in the margins, which no one commented on because he was trying. For practicals, they stood before a row of pumpkins. Shrink them, Flitwick said brightly. Harry's pumpkin neatly shrank to marble size. Hermione's followed, identical. Ron's shrinked and imploded. Well, Flitwick said kindly. At least it's compact now. Ron sighed. I think my wand just gave up on me. The final exam night was peaceful, no magic, no dueling, no disasters. Just the map of Jupiter, the telescope, and a sky so clear it looked painted. Luna waved at them from a nearby tower, her voice faint in the breeze. Good luck. Don't anger the stars. Hermione frowned. You can't anger the stars. Luna tilted her head. Not with that attitude. Harry laughed quietly. I think she's right, though. The three of them worked in comfortable silence after that, writing coordinates, sketching Jupiter's moons, and feeling like the year had exhaled. When the marks came, McGonagall herself pinned the parchment to the notice board. First place, Harry Potter outstanding all subjects. First place, Hermione Granger outstanding all subjects. Third place, Ronald Weasley all outstanding except potions, acceptable. Ron stared at the list. Acceptable? Acceptable. Mom is gonna haunt me in my dreams. Harry clapped him on the back. Mate, that's basically a pass from Snape. You're a legend. Hermione added dryly, honestly, if Snape didn't insult you at least once, I'd suspect polyjuice. Later that night, when most students were celebrating in the common room, I was summoned to Dumbledore's office. Professor Flitwick was already there, perched on the edge of a chair, eyes gleaming. Dumbledore smiled as I entered. Harry, my boy. Do sit down. We have something, rather exciting to discuss. I sat, heart thudding. Am I in trouble again? Flitwick chuckled, his voice high and bright. Quite the opposite, Mr. Potter. You're being invited. Dumbledore folded his hands. The International Confederation of Wizards is hosting the Under-16 European Dueling Championship this summer, which is in France. Hogwarts, and indeed Magical Britain, may send one representative. It took me a second to process. You want me to compete? Flitwick's chest puffed proudly. Indeed. I will accompany you as your instructor and your coach. Before teaching, I was the 3-time British dueling champion, you know. I grinned. I've heard rumors. Dumbledore's eyes sparkled. You will also be joined by your godfather, Sirius Black, as your guardian, and Professor Lupin, who has graciously agreed to assist with training. Between the three of us, I dare say you'll be in very good hands. I couldn't help but laugh, partly from excitement, partly disbelief. Training with Sirius, Remus, and Professor Flitwick? That's, wow! Flitwick hopped down from his chair, clapping his tiny hands. Oh, we'll make quite the team. I dare say by August, you'll be ready to face anyone on the continent. Dumbledore nodded solemnly. This is not merely a competition, Harry. It is a chance to show that Hogwarts stands strong, even when the world shifts beneath our feet. I met his gaze. I'll make sure of it, sir. Back in the dormitory, as the firelight flickered low, I told Ron and Hermione about the offer. Ron nearly dropped his chocolate frog. You're kidding. France? For dueling? Hermione's eyes lit up. That's incredible, Harry. International level spell work, the kind of dueling that tests your reflexes, your creativity, and your ability not to blow up the judges, Ron added. I laughed. I'll try not to. Outside, the castle slept under a sky full of stars. Tomorrow, the train would take us home, but for me, summer wouldn't mean rest. It meant training. And the next adventure. Sorry for not uploading the chapter yesterday, I was busy in my life. Well, she happens. Ho, you enjoy. 911p2. Chapter 39, Notice. So, a little delay in updates cause my laptop decided to give me a middle finger and is not booting up. I'll have to take it to the repair shop to fix it. Expect a chapter after this week, probably. If the damage is severe, I'll have to switch it to the phone. See ya. 911p2. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.